Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please your Father will work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father will work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please your Father will work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm gaining, All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I'm joined by my friend and scholar, Baselit Analyzer. How you doing today, sir?
Doing very well. I'm looking forward to discussing this movie. It's a great film, one of my favorites, and I think this is an audience favorite. People are really going to like this movie, especially this one's for the boys, especially. It's a great one, so I'm excited to see what you think of this. I recently covered this movie just like a couple months ago, and it's worth multiple rewatches. Obviously, it's worth multiple analyses, and it's going to be one of those that lasts for a long, long time. It's a great film, so I'm looking forward to it.
And it was intended to be a series. So
Mhm.
we have a sponsored stream. A major shout out to our anonymous sponsor today, who has chosen for us to do a movie review of Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, starring Russell Crowe as Jack Aubrey, the commander of the HMS Surprise, and their battles with the Acheron, the French
Right.
ship. And as you said, it is a fantastic movie, and it was actually intended to be a series, from my understanding, and there were supposed to be multiple films, but it didn't make as much money as they were hoping in regards to the box office success, and therefore it's been delayed. And I saw, just looking up again research for the stream, Russell Crowe has been like clamoring for another sequel for really all the way up to 2001, and now there's talks of a potential prequel. Are you familiar with any of this?
Well, so there's one reason why this movie didn't slam at the box office. There's one particular reason, and that's because it came out the same year as The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, which
Oh,
completely dominated the box office. It dominated everything for the year. It dominated all the awards, except for actually an interesting thing is that this movie did get 2 Academy Awards. I think it was cinematography and best sound design, and those are important. Those may not seem like important. I mean, say what you will about the awards themselves. That's whatever.
right.
But 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 if the awards do mean anything, then they do mean something for this because the movie it's directed by Peter Weir. It's based on the novels written by Patrick O'Brien, who wrote a whole series of Lucky Jack novels, and I've read 3 of them. The 3 that this is based on, there's the HMS Surprise, The Far Side of the World, Master and Commander, and so it kind of takes all 3 of those, and it's a little bit different from the books because first of all, we have a massive sort of it's a whole series of books, and
Yeah,
it
here's the
sort of
books
truncates
for
it down
people.
into 3. Yeah.
21 books.
Yeah, and it's actually an example of this is rare, but it's a rare example of when the film can actually override the books. The books are enjoyable for in their own right, and they certainly exist as we were just talking about this as a yarn. I mean, it's a long story about this protagonist, Lucky Jack. It's really a great adventure story, a nautical adventure story for men and boys. And but the movie does a great example. It does a great job of taking all of the important points in the books and really putting them all into action. And the movie is great because it's pure action. There are many reasons why this is a great movie, but it's almost from beginning to end, it's just relentless. It's pure action, and the story is amazing. We care about all the characters, and I'll just say this, the best part about this is that Jack Aubrey, Lucky Jack, is a great example, one of the best examples I can think of, especially in the 21st century, of leadership, manliness. This is a really masculine. This guy is a real leader,
Right.
and this is something that's really missing, especially in cinema now. But even at the time, I remember when the film came out, and I didn't really know what to make of it because I wasn't familiar with the books at the time. And I remember thinking, well, we had Pirates of the Caribbean. Now we have this. We have this. Hollywood does things in kind of cycles. We have a bunch of nautical movies, and also I thought that the title was too long when it came out. I didn't get what it was, and that's kind of coming off of Russell Crowe had done a couple of not great movies. Of course, he did Gladiator, and then he had done The Insider, but that's 90s into the 2000s. And then he did things like Proof of Life. Proof of Life, he says the term Proof of Life like 400 times in the movie. And then we have this movie. I didn't know what to make of it. Boy, was I wrong. And I think that movie-going audiences were wrong at the time about this movie, and it's really this is a movie that people have gone back to, and seriously, the fellas, I mean, if you haven't seen this, like you got to see this movie. It's
Right.
really it's really fantastic.
Well, and that's what I found researching the film was part of the reason why there's a potential for a prequel. There's talks in 2021 that they may make a prequel to Master and Commander, but the reason why it's even in negotiation is because of the streaming statistics that millennial men specifically, according to what I was reading, are so interested in this film and they stream it on Netflix or whatever
Yeah.
platform so many times to rewatch it that people said that there's clearly a strong interest from the younger generation regarding this film. And it came out in 2003. And so I remember seeing it. I think it must have been like 2004 because it was November 14, 2003 is with the release date. And I was, I was young back then, and it was just like exciting. I just remembered the war scenes. So going
Yeah.
back to watch it for the movie review, I hadn't seen it in ages. And
Yeah.
there's so much
Yeah.
more to it than I remember it as a kid watching it. You're just excited for the blowing up and really the battle scenes. Everything else felt kind of boring.
Yeah, one thing that's done this with millennial guys is, especially during Karanka, when everyone was locked down, there was a big push for, obviously, for getting outside of your immediate environment, for getting outside of yourself. Travel is archetypal. That's something that people are always going to want to do, adventure especially. But one thing, my interpretation of this, and one reason why I think that guys especially hunger for this, is that, again, we have probably the strongest male character you can have in a movie, at least of his type. And it is one of the clearest examples from start to finish of what a great leader is. And this is something that when it came out post Big Nine, it wasn't the same. The frame of reference wasn't the same, because at the time, even with all the things we had going on after the Big Nine event, one thing that we did have was, we did have male figures.
Right.
Say what you will about them, but we did have male figures, uh, um, pro- providing some sort of example, for good or for better or for
And
worse.
Pat Tillman, the NFL player for the Cardinals, who gave up his NFL career to go,
Mhm.
and then obviously we find out that he was
Right.
killed by friendly fire. But
Mhm.
that's the point that you're making, is that 2001, 2002, we saw a lot of masculine men.
We did.
What they
Yeah.
thought they were doing is rising to the call of duty.
Yeah, we saw W standing on the rubble saying, I hear you, and all that stuff, which is funny if you go back and watch that speech. By the way, it's not actually how you remember it. It's been sort of mythologized. But yeah, we had these figures, and it's especially important, I think, for men to watch this movie who relate in some way to, either they were raised, it's like in Fight Club, a generation of men raised raised by women. If you are lacking that sort of figure in your life through circumstance, then this is a great movie to watch, because you can relate to it. These guys, it's the whole movie is men on a ship going down to a very young age, and you realize that there's a hierarchy on the ship, and they all are beholden to this one guy, and even he's beholden, of course, to the admiralty and to people
Right.
outside of the ship, which are sort of unseen presences. But you need a guy, you need a man who is confident and who treats people with firmness, but with kindness, and who's an expert, and you believe has lived the experience that you are going through. And that there's so much to say about his leadership in this movie. But one thing watching this is that I can't imagine, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but every time I watch this movie, I'm inspired. I'm like,
Yeah.
I love what happens in this movie. You want to be on this ship. You want to serve for this guy. And service, of course, is an important thing that's also lacking in the world right now. So I think it's a great film. Great. It's one of the rare movies where I would say, usually when I watch a movie, I'm not looking for morals, or for the film to teach me a particular moral. Um, and this one's not a fable, but it does provide a clear example of the virtues of leadership and strength and service. So it's a great film. Yeah.
Right. And our anonymous sponsor, I mean, you kind of hit on the major points. The message that he sent me in regards to why he wanted this film was that it's a rare, positive portrayal of masculinity in American films. True. And it's faithful to the books. Our anonymous sponsor is an avid reader, so he had already read the books. And the author's stepson air is Count Tolstoy was a devout Orthodox Christian and head of the International Monarchist Society.
That's
So,
interesting. Yeah. It's also interesting what he says there um, what was the first point that he made? The first 2 points again. I'm
the
sorry.
first one was a rare portrayal of masculinity in American films.
Yeah. So okay. So I imagine someone saying, but it's not an American film. But one of the points actually, and this deals with the anonymous donor's second point, is that it actually is an American film, even though it's about the English on a ship and they're chasing the French and it's
Right.
Napoleonic Wars. It's actually changed from the books because the books the particular series of books that this one is based on, which is Far Side of the World, HMS Surprise, um, the crew is chasing an American harpooner ship. They're chasing whalers. And so when Peter Weir put the film together, he thought, look, American audiences can deal with a lot of things, but it presents a conflicting protagonist. Who are we going to go for? We can't go for these guys if they're going against the Americans. We're conflicted with that. So they just sort of changed it to the French, which is still historically accurate. I mean, it's a really historically accurate series of books, even though it's a historical fiction. The
Right.
truth of it really comes out. And again, they're pursuing the French. This was also relevant, of course, in the wake of Big Nine because there was such an anti-French sentiment. So we're on an English ship. We're chasing the French around the world, and the mission is very clear. I mean, the movie starts off with the mission statement with an epigraph about what they're doing, and it really never veers from that. We have a whole bunch of issues in the meantime. We have a clear, like, sort of Darwinian dichotomy going on with the Doctor, and we have sort of anarchic elements that are explored more fully in the books. But those also are those are kind of encompassed within the structure of the film, and what they do is they're sort of put by on the wayside with the overall mission. And that's one of the most important aspects of the film, which is that I'll go into this further later on, but when we go through it, but that I think it's important, especially for younger people, to understand that hardship is something that we sort of have a right to complain about when we're going through things. Like if we take on a new job and we can't understand why we're made to do certain things, and that's healthy to question, it's healthy to think critically. But one thing that we have to learn as we grow older is that when older people who are in charge, who are providing an example for us, and we don't even know it yet, when we're sort of apprentices for whatever job we're in, when they do those things, it's important for us to just grin and bear it, get on with the work, and then sort of learn through experience.
Right.
I mean, if you're an electrician, and you come on the job new and you don't understand why they're having you do certain things, then you're probably, especially now and in the Western world, we want to question those things and then we end up complaining. But
Right.
there's a difference between questioning or healthy questioning and complaining. And this movie really shows you an example of where the delineation lies in terms of leadership.
No, well, you keep saying leadership, and I was struggling to title it. I titled it ended up being Loyalty in War. And at first I had leadership in war.
Yeah.
And the reason why I changed it to loyalty is because I wrote down a handful of points that I think are the central motifs and messages. And then I wrote down what I saw as like the 7 or 8 most important scenes, and then what the underlying message was there. And I felt that it is, as absolutely to your point, the masculinity and leadership of Jack Aubrey. But what that authentic masculinity and leadership does is create loyalty amongst the crew. There at one point in the movie, we see a man who's on one of the central masts of the ship. It breaks off. He goes into the ocean, and then they actually have to leave him to die in the sea. And again, loyalty to the mission, loyalty to the duty, but also then regalvanizing the crew, loyalty to each other. That I felt like loyalty is sort of loyalty between the Doctor Stephen Maturin and
Yeah.
and Jack Aubrey. That the leadership and loyalty is one of the central messages. And for me, when I think about contemporary United States, is obviously we don't have genuine leadership. And I think part and parcel of that is we don't have real loyalty towards the country in the same way. I mean, we just did an open panel last week after the Trump assassination or attempt, but I wouldn't, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to die for these endless military industrial complex wars. I wouldn't want my children to. And it's sad that we live in a country where our biggest enemy is the system of our own government. I mean, that's
Yeah,
what I'm more scared of is the CIA than the FBI or the NSA than any foreign nation. And yet in this movie, we see the loyalty to the country. I mean, there's explicit references to HMS Surprise being England in the
that's right.
sea.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great point. I was just thinking that. I mean, say what you will about the greater context of colonialism and the Napoleonic Wars and the historical aspect of this. What the movie does well is it points out that all of that exists, and yet the the macrocosm and the microcosm have this they have similarities, but there's a difference. And the thing that drives them is that, just like you said, their ship is England. It's national territory. Everyone on the ship is not only English and fighting on the ship, but they're fighting for the things that they hold dear. They're fighting for the people back home, their families. They're fighting for each other. They're fighting for Lucky Jack. They're fighting for their way of life. And any any group, fighting, this is like the core thing that you want with each other, which is that from highest to lowest on the ship, everyone is loyal to the guy in charge. And he makes clear that sort of adage that we hear about: a bad decision today in war is better than a great decision tomorrow. As long as you trust that the guy in charge knows what he's doing and has your best interest at heart, it doesn't matter if he fails. It doesn't matter if he's mean to you, or even at times in the film it seems cruel, but they all accept this because they're all part of this one whole unit, and they want to go. I mean, he even states this in the movie that they will go all the way.
Yep.
They'll go all the way. They'll even die. Right? They'll go, and everyone on the ship may die, but
Right.
they deserve that of each other. That's an honor for them. And the honorable component in the movie is probably the biggest thing that's missing. Now, there's the concept of honor is so foreign to most people, but the fact that, and we'll get into it, but the fact that these two friends on the ship who are low down, in the ranks, are rewarded at one point, and then they have to cut one of them loose,
Right.
is utterly painful, but it's an honor that they achieve in the movie, because they are true to what they believe in and their values, and they know that this is a risk that they're taking. So it's amazing, the characterization and the storyline in this, how we care about every single person on the ship, and that they manage to do that. It's so rare in movies.
Right.
So,
And the Aubrey Maturin series, for those of you who aren't aware, that there is some sort of historical basis. Now, this isn't fully depicting, but for those of you who aren't aware of Admiral Thomas Cochrane, you should familiarize yourself. And let me pull it up here. Is that some of the expedition, the life of this man right here? If you've never heard of him, you definitely should check it out. And I'm going to share this link right here. This is a Kings and Generals video on the craziest sea captain in history, Thomas Cochrane. And this is an hour, 17 minutes going over his expeditions and his life. I'm going to share that with you guys right now, so you can check that out. But his life is incredible. And he was the wolf of the sea, or the sea wolf is what he was referred to. But in the movie, again, the whole premise, and we'll get more into it, is that this smaller ship, older ship, the HMS Surprise, is chasing this much larger, much better equipped, has 2-3 times more men of this French ship called the Acheron. And this is actually based on a real tale in which Thomas Cochrane took it's called the HMS Speedy. It was a small little ship that was fairly quick and only had 13 cannons on it, something like that. And he took a Spanish ship that had like 40 some cannons. It was twice as large, and it had 6 times the amount of men. And Thomas Cochrane and his crew flew an American flag on their ship and sailed directly at this Spanish ship. This is tied with, again, at the end of the movie, how exactly the HMS Surprise takes over the Akron is that they fly a whaler's flag, insinuating that they're not British. And then once they get close, they raise the British flag. Well, this is based on a real, actual story. I'm not saying that this is the way that the movie depicts it is history, but it is historical fiction. And Thomas Cochrane, these men sail all the way up to this massive, this was a state-of-the-art Spanish ship at the time. This is during the French Revolution, so right towards the end of the 18th century. And they get close, and according to the biography, Thomas Cochrane said they sailed until they could see the whites of the eyes of the people on the other ship. What they did then is attach their little ship to the Spanish ship, where there was still distance, but there was ropes attached to each other. They pulled down the American flag, raised the British flag, and started shooting their 13 cannons straight into the side of the Spanish ship, killing the captain in the first blast. But because of this other ship was so state of the art and it set up so much higher in the water, their cannons, they had 40 some of them, couldn't actually hit the HMS Speedy, and they would just sail right over the ship. And so the smaller ship was able to elevate just like they did in this movie, where they take the wheels off the back of the cannon so the cannons on the ship can aim upwards and hit the French ship. Well, this is what Cochrane did with his men. And after they annihilated the ship, he told them that, men, you're either going to have to take this ship or you're all going to be killed. And they jumped on the other ship and then defeated the Spanish again. And they were outnumbered 6-1. And so if you're not familiar, check out the life of Thomas Cochrane. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, and he had his own instances with the British Royal Navy. Even though I forget the amount of years, but he had this little tiny ship, the HMS Speedy, and he shipwrecked or took over 53 ships. I forget in how long. Maybe it will say here in the Wikipedia. But within it was really just a few years. Anyways, I may try to find it, but within a few years, he took over 53 ships, and almost all the ships that he took were bigger, better equipped, more men, more state of the art. And it shows that there is something to real leadership and real like military genius. And so despite having none of the technological sophistication as his enemies, Thomas Cochrane was successful. And it's amazing, the end of his life, again, look it up if you're interested. He ends up sailing down to Brazil. He was the leader of the Navy in regards to the Brazilian independence, Chilean independence, Peruvian independence. And so he fought for the British. And then at the end of his career, when the British weren't recognizing his military genius and giving him the ship that he felt like he deserved, he basically becomes a private contractor and goes down and works for these other countries and then liberates them essentially. And he's celebrated as a hero. Even again, not a hero, but Che Guevara celebrated Thomas Cochrane for Peruvian independence, because there's no way that they would have been able to win without Cochrane leading their navy. So fascinating life. And this is, again, the books, Aubrey and the Maturin series. It's generally, again, it's not totally focused on Thomas Cochrane, but it's playing off these actual historical events where a single man, and being a naval leader, was actually able to accomplish like some of the most incredible feats.
Yeah, there's also precedent for this. I mean, the underdog, certainly, especially with the English and the Spanish and the Spanish Armada in 1588, it's sort of the same tactics. The Armada is headed towards England, and then they have a much larger fleet. The ships are much bigger, and the English face them with smaller ships and realize that they have an advantage as far as maneuverability is concerned, and sort of surreptitious entryway into the war waterways in which they'll stage a fight on the sea. And eventually the whole thing, the Armada is shipwrecked in what they call the Storm of God. And then this leads to, a few hundred years of superpowers realizing. I just read this, just did this book on drone warfare, and it talked about how the age of modernity begins, really with the Industrial Revolution. And the thing that drives modernity is not just the machines, but it's the realization that the sea is the lubricant on which the machines will give rise to globalism. As far as people, if you can control the sea, then you don't have to go across land in order to conquer a country. You can bring your country right to the borders of another country on the sea, because it's international waters. Right. And so the English realized this, and really, the English and the French in this, or the English and the Spanish, the Portuguese, various nations are warring for this, but the English domination of the sea is sort of seen through these heroic stories. And one of the other things about the book, the series of books, is that I realized that the the relationship between Aubrey and Maturin, his best friend, is one of it's kind of it's dualistic, and it represents in a way what we see as father figures, human father figures and leadership qualities, because the people we look up to are not all one thing. We're all complex human beings. And you think about, for instance, like, if you grew up with a father, then you realize that all of the time that you spent as a teenager rebelling against the things that your dad said, or you don't understand his decisions or his decision making processes, then what you realize when you get older is that they, number one, are doing the best they can, and they're following in a tradition of their own fathers, and that this is sort of seen through the relationship between these two characters, because although they're not one-sided or one-dimensional, they are almost complete opposites. Aubrey is a total alpha. He's physically handsome. He's smart. He's like a swashbuckling buccaneer type, and
Right.
he is completely, he is all about the mission that he's been given from the Admiralty. Whereas Maturin is more of an anarchistic, freedom-loving character who wants to
A
buck the system.
naturalist.
He's a naturalist. He wants to buck the rules. He's interested in what evolution might be and all these
Right.
things. But somewhere in the middle of them, you get this decision-making process where they both are united on essential things, and those things are loyalty, friendship, honor, leadership amongst the crew, manliness, and looking out for each other. And not just I think the most important thing about this is that it's not just telling people what to do. It's an important concept in literature and in movies that we show instead of tell. The great stories are shown instead of told through exposition. And what you get in the actions of these guys is that they show you, they demonstrate that not only can we assume, if we're new to the ship, that they've lived those things, but they know what's best, even if they're wrong. Even if they're wrong, we trust in the fact that they have our best interest at heart, and that sometimes our best interest is at odds with the mission's best interest. But that's what we get in life. We have to, sometimes what we want is absorbed into something much bigger. That's what that's the whole point of service and loyalty and caritas, charity. And you really see that with this sort of dichotomy between these two characters, which is played out more in the books, but we really get this in the movie. I mean, the doctor is kind of weak, sickly, but he has things that Aubrey doesn't have. He's got an intelligence, a surgical
Yes.
ability. He operates on himself,
Yes.
and so that makes him a man in the way that we see Aubrey probably would not have been able to do that. And
Right.
yet he
It's a
has
different kind of courage. It's a different
that's
kind of
right.
bravery.
Yeah, and yet he has a dispassionate sort of objectivity when operating on people, and Aubrey is dispassionate in terms of his leadership. But when it comes to the boy who's been injured, Aubrey, you can see it in his eyes. Aubrey is pained by the
Well, and
decision he's
he
made.
mentions that the boy's father basically gave him his son and told him to protect him. And
That's
he's
right.
one of the few characters that actually survives to the end of the film, but he loses his right arm.
And what's brilliant about this is the fact that he loses his right arm makes him mirror Aubrey's hero, who is Nelson.
Ah,
So
yes.
he's injured on the ship. Nelson dies on his own ship. The kid is injured on the ship. He gives him a book of Nelson's great sea battles.
Yep.
And so we see this sort of passing down through
Great point.
generations. And not to mention the fact that when the father asked the son to when he asked Aubrey to take care of his son, it's not that he's asking him to keep him free from danger. That's
No.
not what he's doing. He's asking him to teach him how to be a man. And part of that is this injury that almost kills him. And Aubrey is pained by that, but it's also what he had to, it's his duty. He has to do it.
And go ahead. I was going to say it's the character arc of the young boy who, through losing his arm, and you see him dealing with that reality and growing in, but he grows closer to the doctor. So,
yes,
Dr. Maturin, he becomes a sort of naturalist. He wants to help him look at life and animals, and is excited about the expedition to the Galapagos Islands and looking at new animals that, at least to the English, that's never been discovered, nobody's ever seen or documented before. And so you see the young boy discover his own self, and it's through the leadership of Aubrey and Maturin. But he moves in the direction, but at the same time, at the end of the film, it's his bravery and leadership in battle when they take over the Acheron, that it's his will. And we're talking about a kid here. I mean, he can't be. Oh, we all right? We back?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I'm still here. Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, my camera froze. Oh, I'm gonna have to back out. I don't know what happened with my computer. I'm gonna have to back
Right.
out and join back in. But anyways, what
Okay.
I'll just finish up what I was saying is the young
Mhm.
kid couldn't have been more than 16 years old. I mean, he looks
Right.
like he's about 12 or 13.
Yeah.
But if you want to speak on that, I'll be right back. Just a second.
Yeah.
I got to back out.
Yeah, he's the kid is very young, he's probably about 12 years old, and this is the tradition that Aubrey states that he was in the same tradition on the ship that he joined when he was a young boy. The boys are put on the ship, and this is their education, their military education, and it's probably the same with Nelson. The other thing is that the boy is he holds fast. He is probably more of a man than many guys on the ship, but they accept him as fulfilling this sort of role that he does on the ship through hardship. And the hardship, I think, in the movie and in the book series is one that is a particular lesson to people. We naturally go through these things when we live life. We go through a series of hardships, and that's life. Living in a fallen world, going through hardships as far as our jobs, our education, our relationships, people we love, living and dying. And yet all of those things are lessons that we get through what the boy does willingly. So from the very start, we see the first people that we see on the ship are the boy. We see the young
Right.
boy, and we see him trying to teach a lesson. Really, not overtly teaching, but there's a difference between him and the older character who is still younger, but he's older than the young boy. And we'll see that one of those lessons is how to treat people and how to stand up for yourself, and what to do, what not to do. And Aubrey does the best that he can with that midshipman or whatever he is, the one that has the tragic end in the movie. But these guys, it's definitely very inspiring, and it teaches you. There's a British quality of what used to be, which is the stiff upper lip and the grin and bear it. Get on with it. Get on with the thing. And this is really the thing that brings people together. It's the hardship and the war and the fighting, and this could be in one's own life, seen as a kind of allegory for oneself, a person living their own life. But it's really what makes friends is suffering together, suffering through hardship. And the painful things in life are really what they sort of make the difference, not just the ease and comfort of living on a yacht or something. And so
Right. No, I want to get into that point here in just a few. I figured because I got a few points before we start doing the actual review of the movie, and we will not be playing any scenes. We've made that mistake on a couple.
We've had our experience with that. This was Samuel Goldwyn too, so it would be immediately nuked. Yeah.
So God willing, we are not going to allow any audio to be played, or any scenes to be played. But before we get into everything, I wanted us to kind of do some quick shilling for anybody. First thing is, guys, smash that like. We're live on both this channel and BLA's. If you have any questions or comments, please support my work on Streamlabs, Dono Chat, or here on YouTube. If you're in YouTube and you're feeling generous today, give some COTEL Crew memberships. I know many people would enjoy that. And before I do any more shilling, I wanted to let you tell people how they can support you or what you got going on or anything like that.
Yeah, you can support me at over at my channel, which we're restreaming over there on Baseline Analyzer, and you can sponsor streams. I got a couple sponsor streams coming up. One is on Man versus Beast. This will be on the book Cujo. I'm doing the book Cujo by Stephen King. I've had some, I've been kind of surprised by Stephen King's writing recently. Did Misery and Firestarter. So this one's Cujo. Also the movie The Gray, and The Ghost in the Darkness. Also, I'll be doing Franz Kafka's The Trial, Cosmopolis by Don DeLeo, a couple of literary streams. And also, I just read J.D. Vance's book last night, so I may be talking about that on a members stream, so you can grab a membership over there if you want, and you can super chat or drop donations.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And again, this is a sponsored stream over here. And gosh, we've done, I would say 4 or 5 sponsored streams together. So if you guys have a movie review that you'd like me and BLA to do, go to the website, purchase a sponsored stream, and we'll tackle whatever movie you have in mind. And again, a major shout out to our anonymous sponsor today. Great topic, great movie, and I really appreciate all your support. The link right here is how you can purchase a sponsored stream. I have another sponsored stream later this week, Thursday. We will be doing the historical overview of British Isle Saints. I was going to do that Monday night, talked with the sponsor. He said he wasn't going to be able to make it. I decided to push it back. He still might not be able to make Thursday, but he's giving me the go ahead. Just go ahead and do it, and he'll catch it the next day if not. So Thursday night, we'll be doing a sponsored stream on the Saints of the British Isles, Orthodox Christian saints. Then we'll be doing one on the Church of Christ. And we just had another sponsored stream that hopefully next week I'll be able to get to. So the next 2 streams should be sponsored streams. Although I did just break 30K. And
let's go.
I know, right?
Dude, congratulations.
Thank you, man. So I need to do a 30K celebration stream. I was trying to figure out what to do for that. I was going to invite you, the usual suspects onto the stream if they wanted to join. But I may do that later this week before the second sponsored stream. But I shared a reel. Shout out to iPack. He makes great work, and he's been doing a lot of my clips. And he actually made a reel from our open panel discussing the assassination. He made one of me and then one of you talking about Trump as a threat to the military-industrial complex. Those did pretty good. About 12,000.
Yeah, shouts out to iPack out there. I mean, that got it's got some traction on it. I was surprised to see that come up. So thank you to iPack for putting that together. That was pretty cool.
And I tagged you in the title, so hopefully some people found your YouTube channel from it. But those two shorts got another 100 subs. So I'm now at 30.1K as of right now. So really appreciate all the work. Shout out to iPack. His link's in the video description. Just his link tree. Really appreciate you, brother. I know he does a lot of work for us in the orthosphere and our friends. So
also, I'll say that, we've done at least 20 movies together. So we've done a bunch of movies. You go back on this channel right here at Church of the Eternal Logos and go back and watch our movie streams going all the way back to Beetlejuice. I mean, and there's a Beetlejuice 2 coming out, by the way.
I did see that. I did see that. Yeah. And this one's I have a playlist actually of all of our movie reviews. So if anybody wants to check those out and just watch them, I have a whole playlist. It's just me and BLA doing movie reviews. So we've done quite a few. But also, if you guys want to support my work, one of the best things you can do is go over to my website, davidpatrickcarey.com/register, and become a website member. You can do so with this link right here. And if anybody wants to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. Now, I don't want to spend too much time shilling, so that'll be the end of that. But if you want to sponsor another movie stream, if anybody out there would like me and BLA to tackle a movie that you love, feel free to do so with the original link on the sponsored streams, and I'll share that again real quick. Okay, so with all that being said, now let's go through some of my points, and whatever you have, obviously, we've done this before, so you can cut in at any point. But I wrote down 5 points of meaning and significance that the film represents. I was wanting to lay those forth and then freestyle whatever you feel reflection based on. The first one is obviously something that you've already mentioned in our opening 40 minutes, and that's leadership and duty. So I wrote down Captain Aubrey exemplifies leadership, balancing his duty to his country with his responsibilities to his crew. The film explores the challenges of command, the decisions leaders must make in very difficult times, and the sacrifices required for a greater good and a greater goal shared by a collective of men. And so that was my first point, and we've already kind of hit that one about leadership and duty and Jack Aubrey. Anything you want to say specifically about that point?
You there, clap that man in irons. Right.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best examples of this because it shows that this is okay. So this probably what he demonstrates in this film is probably one of the hardest things, I think, for especially men who are, or males who are growing into men, to understand, which is the ability to say no. No is probably the hardest word for people to understand and to use when it's appropriate, because we have such a fear, and you know this is true. We have such a fear of offending people or trampling over good decorum, and there's a fine line between doing what's right, but also standing up for ourselves. And sometimes we have to, in real life, we're forced to say no to things that we feel like they may be cruel. It may be cruel under the circumstance. I mean, probably the easiest example is when you go to the when you go to the gas station and somebody comes up and has a story and they present it to you and they want, money or whatever, and charity sometimes demands, through the circumstance, let's say you're with your family, and they come up to your family and ask you, you have to say no in a forceful way to get them away, to get them out,
Right.
get out of here. And this is something that I think men, especially younger men, don't understand, because it's actually something that other men respect.
Right.
And it's very hard for people to stand up for themselves in a way that is firm and honorable and gentlemanly, but is mainly firm. And you have to protect the ones you love, and protect, in this example in the film, protect the ship. And sometimes that can be like with what Aubrey does. He had just, in the film, he had just rewarded this kid. He had just rewarded him, and that elated the kids, and showed, it gave them, they wanted to work for Aubrey, but they also know that when they make decisions that go against the rules of the ship, that they're going to have to suffer the consequences. And that presents another lesson in this, which is sometimes you have to you have to understand what it's like to take a beating. You have to, it's not just you being on top all the time in every argument. It's the way that you survive being beaten down, the way that you are able to lose, but get back up again. This is,
Right.
it's obviously something that's very apparent to men.
Well, and
But
you make a good point about that example. So for those who want a little bit context in the film, there's a midshipman Hallam, and he has authority on the ship. He's a midshipman, and obviously the lower rungs of the crew are taking a little bit of animosity out from him, because we see throughout the first half of the film he's kind of um, ineffective. He questions himself at the opening scene of the movie, which we'll see, is that through the fog he sees another ship, but then when Jack Aubrey comes and asks him what he saw, he's like, I'm not sure. I think I saw something. Maybe I didn't. He's indecisive, and he's not actually, he doesn't exude a lot of the strong leadership qualities. Now he's elevated in a place within the hierarchy of control, the hierarchy of authority, which I think what you're getting at is this. That's also something that's inherently masculine, and men, we inherently do that. When a group of men get together, we all, depending on what it is, you go play sports. Sports is a perfect example. Maybe you're all friends, but as soon as you get on the sports field, we all begin to form our hierarchy of competency.
that's right.
And men respect men that are great at something and are at the top of that hierarchy. And the young men that are at the bottom rungs of the ship see this guy, and he's weak. He's not effective. He's not authoritative. He's indecisive. He lacks confidence. And at one point, we talked about the kid who, unfortunately, the mast gets broken off and falls into the ocean. Well, he was asked by the captain to go up there and help him because he was kind of stuck, and help bring him down. Well, he was so scared climbing up the ropes of the mast during the storm that he never even got to the top, and he was able to survive, where the young man that they asked him to go rescue ends up dying and perishing. And so his friends have even more animosity. And the scene that you're saying is that days after, the midship Hallam, he cannot look people in the eyes because they don't respect him. They don't respect his authority. Now he ends up committing suicide. He jumps off the side of the ship with a cannonball. And again, within that, we see the dynamics of loyalty, respect, leadership, competency, all these things that men, in a way, we crave. We want to belong to something greater than ourselves. but we don't want to belong to something that is incompetent. We don't want to belong
Yeah.
to a sort of bureaucratic structure of incompetency, which is so common in the contemporary age.
Yeah, we don't want to belong to something. I mean, this is especially true for when we were kids or when we were teenagers. You know, when we were teenagers, we thought that we wanted to be able to do anything we wanted. You know, that we wish we could just have no rules. But we see that we actually crave structure. We crave freedom within that structure, but we need structure because when times go wrong, we need people to look out for us because we're not at the point yet as men where we're able to completely control, where we're alone or where we're not yet married, or if we have a family where we're in charge. You know, we have to have people who set the rules for us, and we try to sort of maneuver within those. But it shows that absolute freedom and being able to do what you want leads to people this sort of hierarchy breaking down. And one of the things in that scene is that the non-officers, the sailors, are starting to drink and they're starting to interact with the officers. And
Right.
as Aubrey sort of states, we're not going to argue with these people. You cannot think that you're going to connect with them on a human level because in the end, they're going to backstab you and they won't respect you. There's
Right.
a way for Aubrey to give them, to reward them with grog, but they
Right.
can't all be sitting around drinking alcohol all the time on the ship.
Right.
There's a control mechanism and there's a reward, there's a carrot and stick. And
Right.
so the guy that ends up unaliving himself in the movie has come to a point where he realizes that there's nothing that he can do. It's gone too far. As Aubrey points out, you're too old for the position you have. You don't have a go get 'em attitude. You don't have the competency. You have to make this work for yourself. And you brought up sports. Sports is a great, I mean, sports is a stand-in for war in many ways. And it's like
Right.
the first, yeah, if you ever played contact sports, I remember the first time that I went to football practice when I was an 8th grader. The first time I played lacrosse, I was a lax bro. You're worried because you've been growing up with your friends and you play fight and stuff. You may have even been in fights, but now you're in a thing where you have to, on the one hand, control your aggression, but also be aggressive enough to move the ball forward. And
Right.
you have to hit somebody else in the game, but you also have to get hit. And you worry the first time that if I get hit, am I going to be able to get back up? What if I get hit in the wrong place or whatever? But you get hit and then you take it and then you go on. But in the larger context, you also have you have to have a captain and you have to have a coach. And the coach is the one telling you it wasn't good enough or that was great. And we have to keep going with the plays. You have to
Right.
continue with the plays to succeed. You can't just have everybody on the field doing whatever they want.
Right. The next point that I had was friendship and loyalty. That the friendship between Aubrey and Dr. Maturin, the ship's surgeon, Dr. Stephen Maturin, highlights the personal bonds that develop in extreme circumstances. That their relationship underscores a theme of loyalty, trust, and the tension between personal beliefs and professional duties, which I think was really interesting within the film. And the film presents it as that they known each other for a long time. They knew each other before the expedition on the HMS Surprise. Yeah. And at points, the doctor asks him, am I speaking to you as a friend or am I speaking to you as the captain?
Yeah.
And, Jack Aubrey, Russell Crowe says, well, I want you to speak to me as my friend. And then he gives him real criticism, which again, within this hierarchy, that is insubordination. You're not allowed to talk back to your superiors, but it highlights again this tension and the friendship, because things that happen throughout the film, as we said, Dr. Maturin's sort of a naturalist. He wants to go to the Galapagos Islands. He wants to see the animals. And Jack Aubrey his sole mission is to capture this ship. And so even though they're outnumbered, the crew says that this is a bad idea. We're going to move ahead. We're going to repair the ship at sea, which I thought was actually phenomenal. Watching it as an adult compared to as a kid, how they're able to do that. And then the competency of the crew to be able to do that. You have holes in the bow of the ship and you guys are plugging it. And then you're using wood that you can find to rebuild the ship at sea, never stopping your sailing. But at one point, after the doctor is shot on the ship on accident, Aubrey realizes, like, what's most important? that I'm going to continue after this ship. My biggest goal, and sacrifice the life of the doctor, who needs to get off onto dry land where the ship's not totally rocking, so that we can try to get this bullet and a piece of the the fabric. Gosh dang, I can't speak. The fabric out of his stomach before it starts to fester. And he decides to go back to the Galapagos Islands, allow him to then perform surgery on himself, because he's the only one confident enough on the ship to get it out of his own stomach, and then allows him to stay there for another week so he can explore the island.
Yeah, it also shows the fact that to be a leader is not just to be confident in oneself. You have to be able to take criticism, and you have to trust the people around you that you've put into that position. So the whole point of the officer class, and when they're having dinner, when they're having fun, when they're drinking and all that stuff, and even with his friend alone, even though he tells him, I'm speaking to you as you speak to me as your friend, he also knows that he can't let Maturin know that he's gonna get rid of his position on the ship. No matter what, he's always captain. He has to be captain. He has to make the decisions. But in this moment, he's going to listen to him, and he's going to take his criticism, and he learns from it. So he admits that whether it's like, whatever I did in the past that was wrong, we've got to move forward with the situation now and do the best we can. And I got to learn the lessons. And this is why this movie is great, because it's kind of a counterpoint to the Mutiny on the Bounty. Or I watched a classic film the other night with Humphrey Bogart, which is called The Caine Mutiny, which is sort of a similar situation. That's in World War II, but it's where the captain clearly demonstrates that he's either out of it or he's not competent in the situation. But what still holds is that if you break down the hierarchy on the ship and you can threaten to mutineer anytime you want, then it's going to completely break down. It shows you the fact that even though Maturin is pro-democracy, pro-democratic values, and a kind of anarchy in the world and in politics, that here on the ship there is a clear a quasi-monarchy. There's a sort of monarchical hierarchy that exists on the ship, where there's a guy in charge, and then there's people below him, and then there's kind of lords below him, there's managers, and then there's people. And that, like you said, when they fix the ship, they are confident that everyone on the ship has a specific duty, a specific goal, a specific ability, and they have to do the best they can. It shows you that when the times turn tough, you can always be creative with how you're going to solve problems. It's not just going full bore ahead with, in a headstrong manner. That sometimes leadership is bendable, but you still have to maintain the overall mission.
Right. Shout out to Orthodox Christian Bale, throws in $5, says, be a master and a commander, not a masturbator and a coomer. Yeah. Appreciate that. Orthodox Christian Bale. God bless you, brother. Thanks for the support.
Master commander. Okay.
And then the third point I had is survival and resilience. The crew's journey is fraught with danger, emphasizing the harsh realities of naval life during wartime. The film portrays the resilience and resourcefulness required to survive in such an environment, showcasing the human spirit's endurance.
That's right.
And I'll just run through these last two so we don't belabor the point. The fourth point that I had was exploration and curiosity. Dr. Maturin's scientific pursuits reflect the Enlightenment spirit of curiosity and discovery. His desire to explore the natural world contrasts with the destructive nature of war, the counterpart of his friend Captain Jack Aubrey, adding the depth to the narrative and highlighting the value of knowledge and understanding, not just bravery and combatants. And then the fifth point that I had is war and humanity. The film does not shy away from the brutality of what war is, but it also shows the humanity of those involved in such a dangerous situation. It presents war as a complex, multifaceted experience where bravery, honor, and camaraderie coexist with fear, loss, and moral ambiguity.
Yeah, great points. It shows you also in the end the professionalism of the people in the war. Even when they fight the French at the end and they come across the surge, there's a point in the movie where, spoiler, they defeat the French, they come across a surgeon, and then they're shown the body of the captain and told that he's died. And then the end of the film is, we're supposed to think he goes back, and that's where a sequel would come into play, because there was a little ruse, right? But that's acceptable. the ruse is acceptable within the rules of war in this point, because it wasn't it wasn't at the expense of honor. And it was something that Jack himself may have done. I mean, Jack used a ruse in order to capture the ship in the first place. So, of course, being inventive and looking for new ways to do things, and also, like you were saying, to conquer and to explore. But again, it shows you that none of the people on this ship are ever out of control in a feminine way. They are always professional. They realize that they're making decisions on their free will. When they're ordered to, they're still making decisions because they're making decisions to follow along with what they've been told to do.
Right.
And yet they also have to be, the give and take is they have to be willing to accept the consequences. And one of those is that they could die in war, but
Right.
this is for some, a greater glory.
Right. And you mentioned about the grog and how Jack Aubrey appeases, again, some of the lower rungs on the ship. And there's a scene in which he gives them rum. And this is supposedly the end of the rum that they have on board. And he said, well, we'll drink wine then. And you could see the, I don't know, the cook, the servant, that he's kind of upset with this idea. But when the doctor brings it up during their sort of discussion, their late night table where they all drink and get drunk, he says, well, I'd rather have my men 3 sheets to the wind than mutiny or backstab. And so you have to give concessions. And so if this is the last rum and they did a good job today restoring the ship, they get the rum.
That's right. It's the lesser of two weevils, right? Which is the best part. Yeah, one other thing, this is a lighter point, though, is that the movie also shows the importance of being able to tell a story. You had the ability to get along with other dudes and to have fun and to tell stories and to entertain them. I mean, Jack is supreme at that on the ship. But notice that when he's been drinking and he's playing the fiddle, and Matron is playing the cello, and when they're all singing, it's funny because it almost turns into a kind of hooliganism. They're singing British songs, but it never does that because these are men who are in control of their passions. They're on a ship. They're having fun. They're doing what sailors do. They're drinking, and singing. But they're never out of control, and they're always ready for the next thing that occurs. So I think that's an important
right.
lesson that it teaches.
And then before we start clicking through the actual movie and discussing it, I wanted to bring up, I wrote down 8 scenes that I think are the most important scenes, and feel free to reflect on them any way you want before we start diving in the movie. The first one is obviously the opening battle scene. You can't bypass that one. And so the HMS Surprise is ambushed by the French privateer, the Acheron. And I needed to know what that word meant because I knew it meant something. So I looked it up, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. Maybe it's Acheron
it's Acheron.
Yeah,
Acheron.
So the Acheron is an ancient Greek mythology. The Acheron is a river in Hades and the underworld, and across which the souls of the dead were carried. And so it's also a river within actual Greece, northwestern Greece. But the symbolism of the name is it's derived from the Greek word akarion, meaning a river of sorrow or a river of woe. And this symbolism is reflected in its association with the underworld and the ferrying of souls to the afterlife. And so I thought that was, again, very interesting at a symbolic point that the premise of the movie is Jack Aubrey. He's pursuing the river of woe, the river in which the souls of the dead transpass. And I don't know if that's just a motif or metaphor for war itself and the pursuit of war. But the opening, I'll just conclude this and feel free to share whatever you want. So that message that I took from the opening scene then is the scene sets the stage for the film, showcasing the danger and the unpredictability of naval warfare in the 19th century. So that's taking place in the very early 1800s during the Napoleonic Revolution and him conquesting parts of Europe. And so showcasing the danger and unpredictability of naval warfare, it establishes the antagonist and highlights Captain Aubrey's quick thinking, leadership, and calm, cool, and collectedness under pressure.
Yeah, the Charon, Charon, is the ferryman, right, that drives the souls into Hades. And part of this is that much of the film takes place, especially with the battles, they spot the guys trailing them because they are pursuing the French ship, the Acheron, but they actually get pursued in points. So one of the other motifs is that death is always pursuing them. They're pursuing glory, and they're willing to go to the ends of the earth, right, to the far side of the world to do this, which especially when they go around the tip of South America into the Pacific Ocean, seems like they're going into hell, which is apt if you look at something like the Inferno, because rather than it being hot when they're in the doldrums is another. There's a scene where they're in the doldrums in the film, and it's a sort of time when everything's still and nothing's moving, static. And it's similar to the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, because there's also a Coleridge Coleridge reference here in the film, because the Marine is aiming for the albatross, right? And he ends up, of course, he's aiming for the albatross, and he ends up shooting Maturin instead, which is the sort of the tale of sailors in their hubris, right? Which is that I'm going to bring down the high flying bird. We're here, we're free on the water, and yet I'm only going to bring down myself and cause destruction, which is straight out of it's their burden to bear, it's their cross to bear in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. But that they are willing to pursue their mission to the ends of the earth, which includes going into the underworld by extension, but that is also in reflection, because they're on the water looking at reflections, pursuing them. And we also see this with the death of the midshipman, right? Because he grabs the cannonballs and floats into he dives with his eyes looking up into the abyss. Immediately after that, by the way, after he's gone, because they call him a Jonah in the film, immediately after that, we get the burial scene. And this is probably one of the scenes that you were going to bring up. There's a scene where he's brought the Bible. He's about to read the verse, for the funeral of the midshipman, and he closes the book and he makes this great speech where they pray, and he makes this great speech about how, some of us never live up to the men that we wanted to be.
Right.
And right after that, they are forgiven. There's a baptismal scene. If they're rained upon, they get water, they get wind, and then they can pursue their mission again.
Right.
It's a fantastic scene.
And the Bible verse, so they open it, they were wanting him to read the story of Jonah, which for those that don't understand the importance, is that being called a Jonah within the context of being on a ship means that you're bad luck, that you are a threat to the survival of the rest of the crew and everybody on board. And so the midshipman Hallam, the one that commits suicide, and this is what you're talking about in that speech, which now they get water. They've been out at sea. There's no wind. They're baking in the sun. They're running out of supplies. That he looks at it and he can sense, again, to potentially galvanize the crew, he could use this man as a scapegoat to some degree, but he chooses not to. He shuts the Bible, and then he gives the speech, an inspirational speech to get the men to want to live up to something greater, as opposed to scapegoat their troubles on a man who just committed suicide, who in a way never was able to live up to who he was. That's why he never got the respect. That's why he couldn't save the guy's life. That's why, the insubordination from some of the other sailors.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing, especially with men. I mean, I think that the thing about a ship, and this happens with Mutiny on the Bounty also, is that once people get it, especially guys, once we get it into our heads that somebody is bad luck, or that they are not right, or there's something wrong with them, it's very difficult for that person to get out of that situation, especially if they keep demonstrating the behavior that they were before. And so I think that what Aubrey is saying here is that, we're all fallible. We're all guilty of living like that at a time, or, being that person, or, using another person like that. But what's important is that we try and forgive the person. We try and seek forgiveness, forgive the other person, and move on with what we have to do, because ultimately, God helps those who help themselves,
and that's what I took as the rain, as symbolism of when they forgave this kid, who the younger sailors basically brought him to his own suicide. When they forgive him, God forgives them.
That's right.
And he brings rain, and now they have water to drink. They're not dehydrating, all this different stuff.
Fantastic scene. Yeah.
Absolutely. The next scene I have, and we'll try to move through these quickly so we can start clicking through the movie, is the decision to pursue the Acheron. So it's really right after the opening battle scene. but I feel like it was really important to the premise of the entire movie. So after narrowly escaping destruction, Aubrey decides to pursue the more powerful, better equipped, and more manned ship. This scene, in my opinion, underscores Aubrey's determination and duty to his country. Again, loyalty. That's why I named it Loyalty in War as opposed to Leadership in War. But again, duty to his country. It also sets up the central conflict of the film, emphasizing themes of perseverance and the burden of command.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, that the movie provides a metaphor for us in our personal lives in that they're a smaller ship. They could hide, they could sail literally anywhere in the world.
Right.
You know, they're given a mission to go pursue the ship, but as he states later on, you know, we exceeded our orders a long time ago. But there's risk versus reward, and we have to, you know, you can only succeed big in life with what you're meant to do by taking chances and failing a lot of times, you know, but we have to get on with whatever the mission is. And I think that in our daily lives, that's probably a thing that it's much easier to sit down and, you know, on the sofa and watch movies and you know, eat
pontificate on a live stream.
yeah, and eat McD's every day and stuff like that. But there has to be a point in our daily lives where we are all given a talent and we have to pursue whatever our talent is. We have to go out and we have to go out and get it. We got to
Right.
let's get after it.
Right. We have to pursue it. And getting back to the symbolism of the Acheron, it's pursuing something in the face of death.
That's right.
Again, the symbolism of it. The third scene I had is the Galapagos Islands and Dr. Maturin's explorations. Dr. Maturin explores the Galapagos Islands, discovering new species, marveling at the natural world. This scene contrasts the destructiveness of war with the beauty of God's natural creation and the pursuit of knowledge. Now, there's a point in which he makes reference to evolution, you know, but I was just trying to take the positive note. So it highlights the Enlightenment values of curiosity, of exploration, discovery, and it adds depth to a narrative that is sort of bombarded with potential atrocity, death, you know, general sacrifice by everybody on board to accomplish it. So yeah. I thought that was a good contrast.
My favorite part of that scene is when he finally gets to go to the island, and also the doctor has learned. And when I remember every time I watch this scene, I worry about the animals in the cages. And he says, let them out of their cages. It's a very small thing in the movie, but it shows his compassion.
Right.
It shows that he got his thing. He wanted to go to the island to look at the birds and the bees and the, you know, whatever, the flora and the fauna. And yet he also realizes the mission at hand. So the tables have kind of turned here, right. But it shows you that God's creation is infinite, you know, that we get lizards who swim, you know, and then go on the land. They never witnessed that. The beetle that resembles the stick, you know, the bigger and the smaller things, but also that the men could be in a cage on this ship, but the cage is sort of unleashed.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Is I saw it as a mirror of the general narrative of the story, and so they, in a sense, are trapped animals on a ship pursuing something in the face of death. The ship, the French Acheron. Yeah. And then him seeing the Acheron, the face of death, we'll just use that metaphor. And then he has all the things that he's wanted, all these different creatures in different cages, helped by two other gentlemen, and realizing what's actually important, he frees them from their cage, which is the opposite, because they're running to the ship. Yeah. So it's like, for me, the way that I read that, it was like the mirror inversion of everything, and demonstrating that the doctor, in a way, is the celebration of life, and the mission that they're on is a sort of destruction of life to a degree.
That's right. The ship is I mean, you know, in a way, he wants it to be a kind of arc. You know, he wants to take the animals back. He wants to take them back to England for observation. And he ends up being a kind of, he's carried like St. Christopher carrying Christ, you know, but it's instead of across the sea, it's actually on land at this point. It's in a sea of, it's in a sort of deserted island, you know, and instead of being carried on the ship, he's brought all these people in a sense back to life. You know, he's helped them, he's nurtured them. It's a hospital of the soul of the body. And yet
they're playing cricket on the island.
Right. But at this point, he has to be carried back by this other guy in order to survive. And it's quite a nuanced, very subtle allegory within the film.
Yep. And then the fourth scene, and I'll just run through these real quick. If there's something particular that you want to address, feel free to chime in. I'm going to try to run through these real quick. Fourth scene that I had was the storm and the repairs, which is, I don't have them in chronological order, so forgive me. I was just writing them down after I watched the movie, what came to mind. The HMS Surprise is caught in a severe storm, and the crew must work together to repair the ship and save their comrades. This scene demonstrates the crew's resilience and camaraderie. It emphasizes the importance of teamwork and the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity. We've kind of already mentioned that. The fifth scene is Dr. Maturin's injury and surgery. So is accidentally shot and performed surgery on himself with Aubrey's assistance. This scene underscores the themes of friendship and loyalty, again, between Aubrey and the doctor. And it also highlights the sacrifices individuals make for each other and the extreme conditions that they are enduring it within. Mm-hmm. And then number 6 was disguising the ship in the final battle. We've already mentioned that this comes from some of the legends and historical accounts of Thomas Cochrane. Aubrey disguises the HMS Surprise as a whaling ship to lure the Acheron into a trap, leading to a final battle. This scene showcases Aubrey's strategic brilliance and the culmination of the crew's efforts. It underscores the themes of ingenuity, bravery, and ultimate triumph of perseverance. Number 7 was the discovery of the French captain's deception. So I have these last two scenes come right towards the end of the movie, but I think obviously if there was a sequel, it'd make more sense. They've never made a sequel, so it kind of ends in general suspense. But the discovery of the French captain's deception, after capturing the Acheron, Aubrey discovers that the French captain had disguised himself as the ship's doctor. So it showed a man laying on a bed, essentially with a nasty neck wound, clearly dead, dressed as the ship's captain. What he didn't realize is that the man who was pretending to be the doctor was actually the captain himself under disguise. And so this scene reveals the ongoing nature of conflict and the deceptive tactics used in warfare, because again, the mirror is that Aubrey himself was deceptive with portraying himself as a whaling ship, and that the French captain in a way returns favor by pretending to be the doctor so that he's not taken as hostage. And it leaves the film open-ended, suggesting the struggle continues and that the vigilance and adaptability are crucial. And then the closing scene with Aubrey and Maturin playing music. Aubrey plays, they play music together on the HMS Surprise as it sets sail to follow the Acheron, because they realize that the ship's captain was in disguise. The final scene reinforces the theme of friendship and enduring bond between two men. It also highlights the humanizing aspects of art and culture amidst the harsh realities of war.
Yeah. I just realized that the scene with the French captain also is a kind of synthesis in terms of, I was talking about like the dualism between Aubrey and Maturin. And it's interesting that he disguises himself as a doctor. So we have these two characters on the ship, and yet the French ship must have had the same exact relationship between the two. So they're mirrored, right? Except one of them won, one of them lost. And then that leads to something else. Also, the final scene, something that I kind of forget about is that the final scene, what he did was he gave the officer who was the ponytailed officer who was just below him in rank, that was his first captain's duty. So he gave him the French ship. Right. So now he's a captain. So it shows you this sort of lineage and the passing on of the baton of the captain position, the hierarchy,
and the fact that Aubrey didn't take that ship, right? He wanted to stay on the ship that he's fought all these battles on.
That's right.
A potentially slower, smaller, less armed ship, and gives the better equipped French vessel to his subordinate to become a captain himself, which shows an attachment to the ship, an attachment to his identity, but also a sense of loyalty to his men.
Yeah, he's also, he's got his name, etched into the ship, washed in blood. He's bled into the wood of the ship, which is obviously a kind of Christ-like metaphor here. There's something about leadership.
It's his body.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the final scene is the music in this is so great. And this is something I sort of joke about in terms of literary analysis, but I wrote a paper on this when I was in grad school that there's, this is funny. There's a French literary concept called jouissance, which is actually applicable here, which is that great works result in an ecstatic climax. So this is in a number of different poems and works of literature, but here we really get this because we have gone from beginning to end. We've gone through this we've been battling every scene, whether it's, physically, emotionally, spiritually, there's some sort of battle going on. And in the end, we get the passive calm sea right after the big storm. And it results in these two guys uniting in song, and it's almost like a it's an exclamation of praise. These guys they've gone through battles, and now there's a complete friendship. The ship is united, and they're singing. It's almost psalmic. So it's pretty clever. Pretty clever.
Right. Somebody brings up the point over on your channel. Toledo Duty says, but the French captain, even in disguise, gives Aubrey his sword and a kind of gentleman acknowledgement that Aubrey won the battle. But
great point.
He still is a cheeky way outsmarted him. That was cool. And that's based on the legends of Thomas Cochrane. So we were talking about the HMS Speedy. Thomas Cochrane was eventually defeated by 3 French vessels in the Mediterranean. And when he was taken on board, he offered his sword to the French captain, and the French captain denied it, but because he said, I can't take the sword of a man I've admired for so long. That he was so impressed by the ability of Cochrane on this the HMS Speedy, to do what he did. He didn't accept his sword. And so that's where the great point by Toledo.
That's a great
point. Comes from.
Yeah, that's Toledo. That's really, really an impressive point. That had really slipped my mind. That's really a great point.
I totally forgot about
that's excellent. That actually reminds me of the one. So just briefly, my uncle, who was a Marine officer in Vietnam, the one time he ever talked about the war to me was he actually showed me, he had a pistol, a map, and a compass from his exact counterpart that had died in a firefight. And these were his war trophies. But what he said to me was that, I asked him, like, what is this? I don't remember what I asked him. It was like, what is this? How do you explain this? What does it mean to you? Which is a kind of an even heavier question. I was a teenager, but he basically said that it was expected that if it had been him, then these would have been with the other guy, and it's a kind of, even though it's they're exact counterparts. They're the same exact rank fighting each other, and one perishes and one doesn't. And it's a matter of honor that he keeps it, because he also keeps it for the other guy's memory. He doesn't keep it because he won. He keeps it because the other guy gave his life, and he happened to win in this instance. So it's a trophy.
No, you make a great point about something that I noticed too. Even though there's deceptiveness in regards to the whaling ship, the French captain, there is such a sense of honor, though, during these battles in this historic period, the age of discovery, if you will. And you look at contemporary warfare, and there's not that appreciation that the man you're fighting is essentially your counterpart, fighting and trying to fulfill his duty and protection of his people. And I think immediately of images that have been coming out of Israel and the Gaza conflict about the IDF killing people, sometimes innocent people, have nothing to do with Hamas, and then standing on their dead bodies, urinating on them, doing stuff like this, which I'm not saying is new. This has always been throughout history. We know, the nomadic Turks and stuff would cut off people's head and eat a meal out of the skull of their enemies. But my point is that during this particular period in European history, there was it's a battle to the death, but there's a sense of honor within it. And it feels like in the 21st century, people don't have that view or perspective on warfare and battle.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing for human life to be degraded. It's another for the value that we have as such to be degraded, for our values and what we feel in terms of being human, in terms of creation and how important human life is in the context of honor. And I actually think of that scene in The Big Lebowski when Walter Sobchak, John Goodman, says, "The man in the black pajamas, eyeball to eyeball, worthy fucking adversary." That's probably as apt as you can get as far as
Well, and that hits a point that in regard to this sort of honorific warrior duty, the highest call is to die for a worthy purpose and
That's
by
right.
a worthy opponent.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it gets back to the struggle, the sacrifice, the suffering that we have been so sheltered in the contemporary world, especially in a post World War II Western civilization, that it's all about comfort, hedonism, pleasure. And therefore, there is like this lack of duty, honor, and self sacrifice. There's a give and a take. And I can't help but think that has to do with the comfort level in which we experience in the Western world.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody in the chat brought up earlier that that a lot of these guys are pressed, and that's part of how the books take place. The idea of chasing the American ship, and there's also an American um sort of pedigree for this in the USS Constitution, old Ironsides, right? With the two, I think the two oldest ships that are still in service now or still extant are the USS Constitution and Nelson's flagship, which is interesting in the context of this film that they both provide a sort of reference point for this.
Yep.
But certainly things, the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment. And this movie takes place at the kind of cusp between the Enlightenment era or the Neoclassical era and the Romantic era. That's why we get the two characters. Maturin is definitely a Romantic era Englishman who's more interested in anarchy than the old ways. But it sort of came to a head with World War I, where people really realized that the gallant days of war were completely over. That's why in All Quiet on the Western Front, in the book, you get people, and of course, with the Crimean War before that, but you get people signing up for war thinking that it's going to be like the novels they read about, like the American Civil War, the War of Northern Aggression, where where they're going to get on horseback and ride with sabers into the sunset, and instead they're fighting for the interests of people who are related to each other, right. Fighting over pieces of broken soil. So that continues to this day, of course.
Great point. Well, let's now start going through the movie a bit. I got it pulled up here. And so we're going to click through. Obviously, we're not going to be playing any of the actual scenes here. But here is the midshipman, Hallam, again, looking through his telescope here and looking into the fog and seeing what he believes to be a ship pointing to another man. And he asks him, well, what do you see? And again, the indecisive, I'm not sure. And he says, well, sir, you need to make a decision right now. Basically, should we stand guard? Should we take arms? Are we getting ready to go to battle? I don't know. And then he eventually does tell them to do so, which then draws Jack Aubrey down from wherever he is in the ship to then take a look at this. And he's asking him, what did you see? I don't know. I think I saw something. And so we'll see Jack Aubrey. We're introduced to him right here.
He's so cool. I mean, I just got to say, Russell Crowe in this movie he's so cool. And I'll just say this, that one thing I think about when I watch movies, and I've stated this on our streams before, is the way you can tell an actor and a great film from their eyes, from the way that their eyes look. And a kind of a secret that I learned when I was in drama school is that a bad actor, even on film, and I notice this all the time, it's like you can see them reading their lines behind their eyes. Like they have the lines on the inside of their skull and they're just reading lines. This is, he lives this role and you believe him. You look in his eyes and you believe that these characters are, I mean, if I came from the Amazon and watched this movie and I'd never seen a film before and I watched this, I would believe that these guys are on this ship. They are every actor in this movie is so good.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I was looking a little bit on the cast and the production. They mentioned that every actor was like, I think it was like a 2-week course where they introduced them to like the historical context of the situation so that they could better play the role of who they were on the ship. So I thought that was really interesting that the movie goes through significant lengths to make it historically accurate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So here we see the captain looking out, looking to see if he sees the ship. He doesn't see anything, but he still has a sneaking suspicion that it might be true.
That's right.
And so eventually he does see the flame of the cannonball shoot, and he tells everybody to duck. And we start seeing that the HMS Surprise starts taking fire here and destroying the ship. And we see people getting injured immediately. And then they start firing, but of course their cannonballs are like a quarter of the size, and they're making no indent into the French ship.
Yeah. That guy that you just showed, the cook, is the best character in the whole film.
You
He's
think so?
he's the complainer. He's
Yeah.
always complaining under his breath. Right. Well, we'll have whiskey then, sir. You know, he's he's very good. Is it worth? Somebody said, is it worth watching the film? Yes.
Yeah.
100%. It's worth watching this film. This film doesn't even veer into the problems that we have with other films, especially, you know, films.
Yeah. There's no
in the current
propaganda
era.
in it. There's no propaganda.
First of all, there are no ladies in the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
There's
the
like
only
one.
ones are there's a brief scene in which the Brazilians come out to give goods in exchange.
That's it.
Women on the ship, and Aubrey's like, "Come on, men, we gotta go," and they all want to spend time with the Brazilian girls.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the complaints from maybe some more feminist, progressive-minded people, is that the shit or the movie, it has black slaves, or at least black people that are serving at very lowly roles on the ship, and there's no women really involved in the narrative of the general plot of the movie whatsoever, which from my understanding in preparation for the stream, that's different from the actual books. There's multiple female characters in the books that play significant roles, but the movie does not portray them at all.
Yeah. And just one more thing. Somebody in the chat said, can you give me a reason? Can you, if you don't mind me asking, can you give me some reasons for watching it? Well, we're doing that right now, but also I'll say this, one reason why this is a great film is the continuity. The fact that the point of view and the perspective has a continuous line throughout the film, where we live on the ship in the movie. So everything we see is from the perspective of these characters. We don't veer outside of it. We don't get extraneous messaging. We don't get extraneous. Everything that they think and feel and believe and that they're doing is on the ship. And I think that's pretty unique in a movie. It's actually a pretty brave decision to do that on a movie, because you can see brave in the sense of, you can see producers probably not wanting that. They want more. They want, because movie going audiences are usually sort of too inept to be able to take this. But the form and the content match, because it shows you the struggle of being on the ship. If we're on the ship and they're on a long voyage, we can't get off the ship unless they get off the ship.
Right. And one of the executive producer for the movie was Tom Rothman from Fox Studios, and he's a Jewish executive. And so Russell Crowe, again, just looking up, I was trying to look up little tidbits. On Twitter in 2020, he was defending the movie from criticism. And of course, a lot of young men were telling him how much they loved the movie and how much they want a sequel. And he said, well, send your messages to Tom Rothman, because basically he's the one that's in control if we can make another sequel or not. So hopefully Rothman decides that it's worth doing.
This is Peter Weir, by the way. The director, Peter Weir, did this. I did an analysis of his movie with Harrison Ford. Not many people have seen it. I did the Paul Theroux book, The Mosquito Coast, which he directed in 1985. Peter Weir is he actually retired last year. He said he's not making any more movies, but he's an Australian director. And that was one of the points of the movie, especially with changing it to French, because American, movie going audiences, especially the financiers, were American. It was American studio.
Right. Yeah. They didn't think that the American audience would watch it if they were the antagonists of the film.
Right.
So here we're introduced to the young man. He's going to play a pretty important role. You can see, again, look how young he is. And he's already being groomed to become an officer. So he's probably born to a wealthier family in Britain. He's the character that's going to lose his right arm during this opening battle scene. He's the one that his father told Jack Aubrey, take care of my son. And he's the one that probably has the biggest redemptive arc in the whole film.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Very good role.
And so here we see, again, the British officers, they're taking fire. Tons of people are getting shot. Russell Crowe gets stunned at one point because the ship gets rocked so hard. The rudder gets broken by a cannonball. They're literally dead at sea. They can't even steer. And the ship's actually taken on water. And even this, I mean, imagine that, because this is clearly at some point in history happened. Imagine being in a firefight at sea, in the ocean, no land around you, your rudder shot, and this dude with no protective gear it's just climbing down a rope to see what happened. And if he falls into the ocean, who knows if he's going to be recovered or not.
It's also funny because that's Dewberry or whatever from Lord of the Rings, and the movie came out the same year as Return of the King.
He had a big 2003. Didn't
he? Whatever that dude's name is.
Yeah, yeah. Pippin's on the back of the ship.
That's
here.
right. Yeah.
And so here we see the doctor surrounded by all these men that are bloodied. He has a sort of incompetent helper who can't really do much of anything, but to the direction that the doctor tells him, he's somewhat effective.
Yeah, he's a drunk, which will come to play later when he's got to get that piece of the sheet out of his body, and he's not even steady with his hands. He can't even hold it. He has to operate it on himself.
And I love this scene too here in the opening where the ship's taking on water, like it's gonna sink, and they are pumping it out, and these young guys are literally responsible for moving what would you call it? The
bilge pump.
The bilge pump, yeah, to pump out the water of the boat. And
I know that from my yachty days with my fellow bonesmen.
And just the frantic nature that one would be under during this point where the ship's you don't know if it's getting ready to sink or not, and their service to the ship is just to push this bulge pump as much as they can to get as much water out as possible, so that eventually they'll be able to use wood and fill in all these holes, which again I thought was a great, just this opening battle scene is really
they
great.
Can't swim, by the way. I mean, if they sink, they're screwed. These guys can't swim.
And the only way they get out of this situation is that Jack Aubrey lowers all the boats, the rowboats, and commands all these young men basically that they have to row the ship out further into the fog so that the French ship can't find them or see them. And so that's how they get out of the situation. Here we go. A little bit of the bulge pump right there. And so we'll skip through this opening battle scene. So now we see everything is kind of at ease. They're no longer at war. Jack Aubrey is going through and telling people who did good, who did bad. They goes down to the bottom of the ship, sees that the guy's already patched the boat where the water was coming in, tells him you did a great job. And here's the eldest man on the ship, who must be of very lowly rank, or he's in debt for some reason why he would still be on the ship. And he's in the same quarters of all these young kids, essentially. I mean, we're talking like 12 to 18 years old. And he has a nasty gash on his skull where his brain is exposed, and everybody thinks that he's going to basically die. And the doctor uses a metal coin and basically hammers it in place to create an artificial skull over his open wound.
And then he trepans him. I mean, he pulls a cork out of his skull, the brain out of his skull while they watch, but the dialogue is important here, because they say, like, if anybody can do it, he can do it. They just utterly trust this guy to be able to do it. And it's a combination of the surgeon is so good, but also this guy is the toughest. I mean, these guys are so tough.
Right. Okay. And so here's some of the late night dinners where they're drinking alcohol. They're telling him that the ship they got to go to port, and he's looking at a part in which a cannonball has destroyed a doorway into the bathroom where they dispose of toxins from themselves. And he tells him, no, it just needs a little bit repairing. It's in great shape.
Yeah. I love that guy on the right. The guy looks like fat George Washington or something.
Here's where the kid is. He has a broken arm. It's what he's told, but they're having to amputate the bottom portion of his right arm. And he's having a conversation with Jack Aubrey here. And eventually, this is where he's realizing they're getting ready to tie up the top of his arm to try to limit blood flow and literally cut off his arm right then and there. And you can tell this is affecting a lot of the members of the crew to see one of their youngest, certainly the youngest officer, but one of the youngest people on the entire ship having to get his arm cut off.
Hey, imagine Sean in the chat. Chill out, dude. I'm excited watching a movie. Okay. Yes, I'm bouncing back and forth. I'm on something. I'm bouncing back and forth because I'm always like this when I watch a film or when I'm sitting down. It's hard to sit down. All right. So what else? What else do you have to say?
What, he's upset because you're excited about it? Who's this?
Yeah. I don't know. Somebody in the chat.
All right.
Yeah.
So here they're again repairing the ship, the bilge pump. They got all the water out of the bottom of the ship, kind of getting everything back in order, making it ready for battle again. Here's the scene that you're talking about where everybody is watching. See if I can stop it, where they're looking down on the doctor performing essentially brain surgery. You can see his brain is exposed here. Everybody's just fascinated with it. And
this is interesting because it also he's giving them a lesson while he's doing it, and it mirrors what he would be doing if he was doing surgery back on the land with a
like
an auditorium setting, a classroom setting, watching him.
And so again, not a huge significant scene there. We see him recovering. Some of the young guys are very drawn to him. He has got tons of stories. He's always talking about the Acheron as like the phantom of death, the phantom of the devil. He's always going to sneak back up on him. They got to watch. He very superstitious. The old man's one of the more superstitious figures in the movie.
Yeah.
And so here's the young boy with his arm amputated, and he's told that he was by the doctor that he was the bravest one he's ever done surgery on. And you can tell that Jack Aubrey's pretty affected by this because this was the kid that was put in his care as one of the lower officers, and now again, you would assume that he's right-handed, so now he has to relearn life as a left-handed person. And he gives him, as you mentioned earlier in the stream, the book of Lord Nelson to read some of the stories about his battles at sea.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite scene because Aubrey again provides a great opportunity. You know, he provides a great example for leadership here because he's not overly sentimental. He's not overflowing with emotion in this scene. It's all sort of interior. You see it in his eyes, and he truly cares for this kid. And the gift that he gives him is something that he'll cherish for the rest of his life. It's a book of Nelson's war battles. And if you look on a certain page, he says, I'm mentioned, and I might be mentioned, or I was in that particular scene. But this is a carrying on of legacy. You know, that this is something that he went through. This is something that Nelson went through. And the kid is obviously a type of like a kind of archetype of Nelson here. But the fact that he's visiting him in his sick quarters is, he cares for his crew. Right. He genuinely cares. They all know that he cares about them.
Did I say bulge pump? I thought I said bilge pump.
Yeah, bilge pump. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But that's better.
I don't know. Maybe I misspoke on accident. I thought I knew.
That's even funnier, though. We should call it that now.
Bulge pump.
That's a different movie.
Yeah, shout out to Caravaggio.
That's Master and Commander. Yeah.
In my head, I would say, so I don't know if I said that or not, but in my head, I was saying bilge pump. But yeah.
I'm also on my second Red Bull, by the way.
There you go.
I can't help but bouncing.
Yeah, I'm about done with my ghost here. Got my evening caffeine fix. Okay, so moving forward, again, we see the young boy amputated, kind of a sad scene. But then also right here, we see, again, the ability to restore the ship. This, I don't know, goddess. I don't know if that's Athena. I don't know who that exactly is supposed to be.
It looks like Britannia.
Yeah,
that's the Hail Britannia. Britannia rules the waves, right? Britannia. So that's the embodiment of the British Empire on the ship.
And the fact that they get it so pristine and restored is, again, pretty impressive. And I'm sure people, the ability to do what they did in repairing it, I think is quite impressive. And again, historically, just imagine the men at sea that were able to do that. Here, we see these two, and unfortunately, one of these is going to be lost at sea. He's the one that's going to be on top of one of the masts that break off. Um, and what he said is that he was in, I believe it was Boston or
Yeah.
Massachusetts,
Yeah.
and he saw the Acheron and he saw it being built, and he made a model of that ship, and he's giving it to Jack Aubrey so he knows exactly how the ship is constructed and how it sits in the water. It sits higher up because of the way
Mhm.
that it's built, and he just gives it to him to say that I hope this is a benefits, beneficial to you, Captain.
So what I learned about the construction of the ship is that, in my spurgish determination, is that the Acheron resembles the USS Constitution. It's built. It's the cannonballs basically bounce off of it because it's built with white oak, live oak, and white oak. So it's 3 layers, and it's impervious to water. So the cannonballs sort of bounce off of it, but also the way that they built in that, I guess, in that sort of vertical style that he's done, which is seems to be a true model here. But this is a great scene because, again, like you were mentioning, I mean, we have 2 lowly sailors on the ship who it's an honor for them to be admitted to the quarters of the captain in the first place, and to give him this gift, which he accepts and then uses it.
Yes.
And they're given extra grog, extra rations, and this is great leadership because Aubrey, again, is not overly sentimental. He's not overly gracious. He accepts what they've given him, and he takes it into consideration. And it turns out that he uses it. But even if he hadn't, even if it was just a piece of junk, it's the fact that these guys want to please him. They want to do something for their captain, and they're interested in the mission.
Absolutely. Um, moving forward after this, so he looks it over, again, really analyzes the ship, shows it to his other officers. What scene is this? Oh, this is where they're in Brazil getting.
Where the appears, yeah.
Yeah, there should show. Maybe I can stop it on. Oh, there it is. There's a where they're looking at one of the Brazilian girls.
Uh-huh. Well, because in the books, I mean, Aubrey's a ladies' man, and a lot of it is about his romantic interludes. And if you
Okay, that's a great point to bring up. Then I didn't know about that.
yeah, but all he does is look. He just looks. You can tell just by one. This is why it's a great film because it's one look, and you can tell what he's thinking.
Yes,
but he's not simping. He's got to get on with the mission.
Right. So they restock on everything that they need. Purchase it from the Brazilians there. And now they're back at sea chasing the Acheron. Here's another officer dinner. Again, where they get drunk and share jokes. And you can imagine when I was watching this, here, a good stop there. I could imagine the servant in the back, the one that you said is always critical. He's sitting there and like, look at some of these younger men, like the one right here on the bottom right. He ended up dying at the end of the film, unfortunately. But I could imagine back in the day, you're some 40, 50-year-old man and you have to, be at the beck and call of the captain, which probably to some degree is an honor because it's a higher position. I mean, he gets alcohol and wine and food that the other people don't get.
He also gets to complain with nothing said about it, right? It's acceptable. His personality is acceptable to the captain because he's reliable.
Right. And so you get this impression of the sort of social dynamics that are going on here amongst the officers, where you have one who's very young, inexperienced. You have Jack Aubrey, very experienced. You have another man right next to the young man with gray hair, where he's, seen a lot of battle. So you get a kind of sneak peek into some of the social dynamics among the officers in these scenes where they're eating and drinking at night. And in regards to the alcohol too, I don't know how much people drank back then, but how did they not get dehydrated? Because if at least from the way that the movies portray it, and from my understanding with like whiskey and liquor, how did they drink all day or at least have shots and sip rum and stuff like that and not get dehydrated when water was like a precious commodity? So it's not like they could just sit there with their gallon of water, like we do. I mean, I go out for one night and I'm feeling it the next day.
Yeah, these are hard dudes. I mean, one of the things about water being so precious in films, this is one of the things that happens in Mutiny on the Bounty, is that one of the barrels of water gets tainted, and so if if something gets in the water, it can be very dangerous. But they just put up with hardship, and also it also brings to mind the reason they call them limeys, right? Which is that the British knew that to stave off scurvy, you carried buckets of barrels of limes, lemons or limes on the ship. So they're called limeys. And also, that's where people don't know this. I learned this in my bartending course when I was 20 years old. This is where IPA comes from. So IPA is India Pale Ale. So it was shipped. It's especially shipped in brown bottles because of the sunlight hitting the bottle inside. If it's a lighter colored bottle, it'll taint the alcohol. So they're shipping it over to India.
Right.
Not sure how that story played out, but
so this is again not an important scene, but an interesting scene. We see Midshipman Hallam here, and Jack Aubrey and the other officers emerge from their drinking and discussions they're having lower on ship. They emerge to the top of the ship, and they're all singing sort of British national songs, folk songs, stuff like that. But once the captain emerges, everybody stops except for Midshipman Hallam, which is kind of embarrassing, and everybody kind of laughs at him. But it shows how he's kind of the odd man out often. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't totally fit in.
This is also a key scene because of what he does here. Because we just, like you were saying, we just noticed that the officers had their own quarters and they were singing and they're talking amongst themselves. That's their class.
Right.
The officer class is separate. When we get to the regular sailors here, the fact that the officer here wants to chip in and sing with the other sailors quiets them. They think he's weak. They don't respect that he wants to be, cavorting or laughing with them. That's something that Aubrey tries to bring up later on.
Yep, exactly. So the next part right after this, I hope I can stop on it. There we go. Is they look back and they see the Acheron, or maybe this is the French looking at them. Either way, they realize that the Acheron is behind them. So what they thought they were pursuing, they've done a maneuver knowing that they would pursue, and now they're behind them. Yeah. And this is incredibly dangerous to them because, again, they're outmanned, outgunned, outclassed in regards to the sophistication of the ship. And so Jack Aubrey has to think fast. And what he comes up with is tells them to turn all the lights off. This is the next day. Oh, yeah. So it goes on for a full day. So they open up full sail. They're sailing as fast as they possibly can. And yet the Acheron is continuing to follows them throughout that night, throughout the next day. And here this evening, so the next night, he constructs a buoy with barrels and puts lamps on them, has the ship turn off all the lights, and then sets it out, has one of that young officer, the youngest one, he's tasked with the duty of getting on this thing, lighting the lamps, and then using a rope to climb back onto the ship. And this was successful. So from the French perspective, they start following that buoy with lights on it, and the HMS Surprise is able to sort of dart off in another direction to not be pursued by them any longer.
Yeah, it's incredibly dangerous, and it's brave for this young kid to do this. It's a moving target. That they're going to be a moving target. But the important thing here is that the way Aubrey learned how to do this was he had to do that same thing himself when he was young, at the same age as the kid. So he teaches from experience. So again, his leadership qualities, he recalls an event that he went through as a kid, and now he's passing it on, and it works.
Right. And it highlights, because when he gets up out of the water, he says, "Was that not the most fun or exciting thing that you've ever done?" He's like, "Well, yeah, it was." And he pats him on the back and congratulates him.
Right.
And it demonstrates, again, I kept thinking about young men being part of a group with older men and doing something heroic, and then the other men seeing that and respecting it. That's huge for a young guy.
Yeah.
So anyways, next scene, we see them now sailing. Jack Aubrey's at the top of the ship. They're no longer being pursued, and they're going to try to make a counter maneuver so that they can get behind the Acheron themselves. Here we see, this is where, unfortunately, the storm occurs, and this is a fairly tragic scene in the movie. So a storm emerges. The waters are rough. It's raining incredibly hard. The winds are so fierce. And one of the two young men that brought that model ship of the Acheron to Captain Aubrey is at the top of the mast. And see if I can stop it on there. It's kind of hard to find particular scenes. Okay, so he's one of these men. The other one was successful in climbing down. He is kind of stuck up there, and he's unable to drop the sail so that they can try to outsail the storm, and he's unable to do so. And so Midshipman Hallam is commissioned to go up there and help him get down and get that sail down. He is unsuccessful, and he's terrified as he's climbing up. I think this is him trying to climb up right here, and he's so scared. Oh, there was a scene. There he is right there. So he's almost crying while he's trying to go up there to help him. And while he's on the climb, the mast breaks. Oh, I think that was the scene right there. Anyways, it falls into the water, and Jack Aubrey has to make a very difficult decision. Are they going to? There he is right here. He's in the water in the middle of the storm, and he's hanging on to the mast, which has all these ropes. Obviously, you drop the sails down, and they're still connected to the ship. So as long as he hangs on to the mast, he's going along with the ship. But as they said, this is getting ready. It's starting to sink in the water, and in so doing, it's pulling the ship up, and they're afraid that it's going to sink the ship. And so he's got to make a decision right then and there. And he makes the difficult decision of cutting the ropes. And the man that he gives an axe to help him is the friend.
Yeah.
It's the friend that brought that model ship to him. And so imagine that your closest friend out on a ship in the middle of nowhere, from your perspective as a Britishman, he's out in sea. He's literally fighting for his life at this moment. And you're hoping that he's going to be able to pull himself forward with the ropes. And your captain's telling you that you have to use the axe and cut the ropes right now, knowing that your best friend's getting ready to die. And die a terrible way, being stranded in the middle of a storm in the ocean.
Yeah, it's the worst. I mean, what are they at Cape Horn right here? They're going around South America.
Yeah, I think this is when they're getting ready to go around the bottom of Argentina to get into the Pacific.
So they're at the ends of the earth here. They're, this is Dantean almost. They're at they're at a freezing hell point. And the fact that the sailor, it's dynamic in terms of the characterization here. I mean, like you said, the fact that he releases his friend into this absolutely miserable death and desolation here in the middle of the ocean is very sad to watch. And then the follow up, the crew celebrates because the ship rights itself.
Right.
They're instead of being dragged down. It's interesting.
They can feel the ship being pulled, and as soon as they cut it, the ship resets itself, as you said. And there's an exuberance on the ship, except for, again, the young man who just essentially helped kill his best friend.
Yeah, and then the end of that kid's story is, his story is locked up in a box with his name on it. He kind of rubs his hands on the top of the box, and that's all that needs to be shown in the movie. We don't need exposition to tell us about how sad it is. We've just watched the events. Great story, great movie.
Yep. So eventually, obviously, the next day, here it is right here, home again. So his best friend had made this. And they had earlier in the movie, they had made comments about what they're going to do when they get home. And they were always singing songs together, kind of goofing off, having fun, made the suffering of being on the HMS Surprise worthwhile. And he takes this little embroidery that he made and he rolls it up and puts it in his box, as you said, of his other stuff. And there's no words, but no words really need to be said,
right,
to convey the meaning of what's going on here. So Jack is pretty upset about what just happened, and so is the doctor. And he's saying that you're not the person that I know you to be. This is where he asks him, "Can I speak to you as a friend, or do I have to speak to you as the captain?" And he said, "I want you to speak to me as my friend." And he gives him some criticism that he's basically driving the crew too hard. And he needs to think about their well-being as opposed to his goal of chasing the Acheron.
He also tells him importantly that every time a decision like that is made where someone's life is lost, he tells himself that it wasn't he who forfeited the kid's life. It was the war. It was the enemy that did that to them, that put them in that situation. So it's important to have some objectivity here. But like you said, he's also, are we driving too hard? And then this is when he's told, we exceeded our orders a long time ago. We're not even supposed to be in this area. But that's why Aubrey's a great captain. He goes beyond, above and beyond.
Right. So that's again, we see the inner dynamics between their friendship here, and that Jack Aubrey listens to the doctor, doesn't agree with him, but as we'll see later in the movie, certainly the words resonate and has kind of changed his disposition, especially when his friend is actually shot on the ship and they need to go to the Galapagos just to allow him to heal and perform his own surgery. So here we see they're at this is where they're rounding the very bottom of Argentina, and it's snowing. And this is where I couldn't imagine being on a 19th century, or really it'd be a 18th century ship, and you're literally in freezing water. It's snowing on you, and you don't even see, there's no visible land around you. That'd be horrifying.
Well, you need a captain with a cloak and a cool cap, right?
That's
to
true.
get you through it, and some grog and some laudanum. There's plenty of laudanum to be had on the ship, I suppose.
I would suppose so.
Yeah.
So we, again, another evening dinner. This is where they're telling jokes about, I believe they're talking about Lord Nelson, aren't they?
Yes,
and that
they are.
He was able to meet him, and he had two conversations, and they're all in suspense. They're like, well, what was he's like, the first conversation, I'll tell you. Like, and they're listening intently.
Aubrey, would you please pass the salt?
Right. And then it's kind of humorous. So we see close camaraderie between the captain and his officers. Here we see the sort of a helper to the doctor, and again, the youngest officer here that has his arm cut off, really following Maturin's interest into biology, animals, looking at his notes, looking at all the stuff that the doctor is actually accumulating, like in his own personal space, what he's really doing. And it's about the advancement of knowledge. So while he's in the middle of a warship, he's also focusing on his ultimate goal, which is like furthering knowledge itself. Again, very indicative of the Enlightenment period. And here, this will play a factor. If I could stop it. I can't. Anyways, one of these insects. Oh, there it is. So this insect he's introducing to the young man, it looks like a stick, but this is actually an insect, and he has camouflage and hides his true identity so that he's not attacked by predators. And this is going to play back into why Aubrey raises the whale shipping, or the whaling flag, as opposed to the British flag, because this is sort of, within the movie context, this is the catalyst for him realizing that they need to camouflage themselves so that they can get close to the enemy without being annihilated.
That's right. The stick bug, the ghost. Great things have small beginnings, right?
Right. And here they're now sailing by the Galapagos Islands, and Jack Aubrey told Dr. Maturin that he would be able to go to the island and look at all the animals he wanted for, I think it was like a couple days or something. But now that they are somewhat aware that the Acheron is somewhere in the vicinity, he reneges on his promise to his friend, which really upsets him, because that was going to be the highlight of his trip, to be able to go there and see the flightless birds of the Galapagos Islands.
Yeah.
They're looking at lizards. He says, oh, lizards don't swim. And they go, well, these do. And then he sees that these iguanas are able to swim in the water. He sees there's the flightless bird that he's looking for.
Dodo bird. Yeah.
And so he's so excited. And then when he finds out that they're not stopping, because this is one of the other British, I think it was a privateer ship, but it got annihilated by the Acheron, and part of that crew, maybe it was like 8 men that survived, get brought aboard. Here's when they're being brought aboard right here. So now that he knows it's in the vicinity, he's not wanting to stop. He wants to go chase the boat. And you see his friend. Oh, there he is, dressed in his
his frilly dandy clothes
Yeah.
to go a walking on the Galapagos to look for the dodo bird. Yeah,
Right.
this is ridiculous.
So he's incredibly frustrated and irritated. It ruined his day for sure.
I think Matron is an opium addict in the books. I can't remember. But that sort of indicates his sort of general demeanor in the film. He's a surgeon, so he's dealing with it all
That
the
would make
time.
sense.
But he's not as built as the other guys. He looks kind of sickly at times.
Yeah. And he's always reading. So now that he's
Mm-hmm.
not being able to stop at the islands and his frustration, he doesn't talk to anybody. He just reads books.
Yeah.
But in this scene right here, the young man with the one arm brings him a beetle. He calls it, oh, this is a Galapagos beetle. He doesn't know what the name of it is. He just found this beetle and he wants to give it to the doctor because he knows that he really wants to explore all the wildlife and he's unable to now. And this is a small token of appreciation. And it kind of changes the demeanor of the doctor once he gets this, even though, it's kind of insignificant to what he really wants to do. But the fact that he appreciates his own pursuit for knowledge and the biological dimensions of their explorations, it means a lot to him. And here they're practicing their cannon fire. So they're timing how quickly they can fire all the cannons, and they're over 2 minutes. And so Captain Aubrey's forcing them to get down under a minute and a half. I think they do it in like a minute and 13 seconds. And then he tells all the men again, they get an extra ration of rum that night for their efforts.
Yeah, this is pretty true to life historically too, I think. I mean, it's probably true for any naval ship, constant drilling. But here he pushes them to the limit of drilling, they're they're a tight unit. They have to keep practicing even though they're pursuing or being pursued. And the fact that Aubrey is down in the smoke with them, right, and timing them and then congratulating them is, again, another example of great leadership.
Right. So here the doctor, because he's stuck on the ship, he's getting fish from the sea and dissecting them. He's annoyed by all the noise and the commotion of all the men dancing and singing and having a good old time because he's not able to go to the Galapagos Islands. Here they're doing target practice. Let's see. This is where essentially the ship now is stranded. There's no wind to sail and there's no rain. And the men are incredibly hot, dehydrated, hungry. And the doctor's telling him, I think it's time to go to port. And the captain thinks that their luck's going to change here any day, that they're just going through the worst bit of luck right now. And the old man, who now has his skull, again, he has a metal piece right here on his head, telling them, again, legends, superstitions about the Acheron, the phantom that's going to come and get them, and that Captain Jack Aubrey is going to basically bring them all to their own death. Because
this is a great metaphor for stasis, that when they're in the doldrums, and this is straight out of The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, water everywhere and not a drop to drink, paraphrased. But they are stuck. There's no wind. They're on a calm sea. It's completely calm. And yet there's so much heat and they're in this hellish interior. And then they start making up rumors, right? And they start resorting to sort of almost kind of like womanly behavior here in the bottom of the ship. That's only solved. It's just a metaphor for why they need constant preparation, action, and drilling on the ship. They have to keep moving. They have to keep doing their duty because when they're left to their own devices, this is what happens.
Yeah, that's a great point, that it's a reflection on stagnation and stasis. That's really good. So these things begin to fester. Even the captain's right-hand man's listening to these things and agreeing with them, putting all these ideas in the young men. And it's also festering disloyalty with midshipman Hallam here. And so you can see they're all looking at him right here. This is midshipman Hallam. And he can feel that all the other men on the ship don't respect him, don't really care for him. And based on the legends of the old man in the bottom of the ship, they're beginning to associate him with Jonah. So um, this cursed figure that's bringing bad luck to the ship and is potentially going to bring demise to everybody on board. And eventually Hallam hears about them thinking that he is filled with this sort of Jonah spirit of bad luck. And he's telling the captain that they don't respect him. This is after one of them walks by.
Shoulder
right
checks
here.
him. Yeah.
Yep, shoulder checks him. And Jack Aubrey stops him right here. So he shoulder checks Midshipman Hallam, this man right here, who lost his best friend.
That's right.
And tells him to be locked up. And he's going to get whipped for it. And he's asking him afterwards, Midshipman Hallam, the captain is, why did you not tell him to salute you? Because whenever they walk by, they should salute you.
Yeah.
And he says, well, next time I will. And he's, pressing him again. Well, why didn't you? And he basically reveals that they don't respect him and he doesn't know what to do. And so he kind of just dismisses him.
He's also in terror here of the captain, which kind of reflects the beginning of the film when he was in terror to wake him up, when it was his duty to be looking for the other ship. And, he's looking into the fog. He thinks he sees something, but he's too afraid to stand up and be wrong. And here he sort of does the same thing. But the question is, what would have happened if Aubrey hadn't have spotted it? It would have gone on and possibly gotten worse. And maybe the crew would have, there would have been a revolt or they would have killed, who knows what would have happened.
It would have only gotten worse. But unfortunately, this man's going to kill himself because instead of doing what Jack Aubrey, as you said, that inspirational speech, trying to become the best man that he can, he doesn't want to, he kind of shies away from living up to that. And his way out is eventually going to kill himself by jumping overboard with a cannonball. We'll see that in just a moment here. So this is another conversation that they have about the pursuit, what their goals are, and also about maintaining order. So Dr. Matrin is saying that, hey, it's a little too harsh to put this guy in chains and lash him. And he said, well, what do you expect me to do? I got to maintain order. And what we see in the next scene is the young man getting lashed right there on the ship.
Yeah, he also, this is an interesting parallel with now, because Matrin wants to, basically it's like there's a zero tolerance policy on the ship, and Matrin's response is kind of like now it's like, well, we need to understand the experience and what he feels, and he's lost his friend, and all of that is fine, except for the fact that Aubrey points out that we have to have order on the ship at all costs. We can be compassionate, we can be kind in light of the duty that we're doing.
Right.
We can't break the rules of the way that the ship works. And that's an interesting parallel for the ship of society that we're on, because we see that when order breaks down in small ways like this, we get a sort of a chaos, right? And so he says, all we have is responsibility. We've got duty, we've got responsibility, we've got order on the ship. That's all we have. We're one step away from being mutiny, from a mutiny all the time. So you have to maintain order. But it's also the fact that Aubrey kind of points out without saying so that this guy made a decision. He knew what he was doing. He knew the rules and he broke the rules. And he also is willing to take the punishment. So he takes the punishment and then he gets back to doing what he was doing. He gets back to serving on the ship. You just get on with it.
Right. And it was during that scene where the doctor and Aubrey are going back and forth, where he mentions that, like you said, understanding the plight, maybe you're pushing these guys too far. You're letting them drink at night and they're getting all rambunctious. Why don't you pull some of the liquor away from the sailors? And he said, I'd rather have them 3 sheets to the wind than essentially mutiny. And so he'd rather appease them each night by giving them alcohol to drink than, again, maybe understand their plight more and be softer in regards to the demands of life on the HMS Surprise.
Rip made a good point. I just caught that the guy is a doomer boomer on the ship. That's a great point. And Bonsai points out something good. The cat comes out of the bag. Yeah, they pull the cat of nine tails out. And I guess that's about the worst thing you could get on the ship besides the keel hauling, which is the death sentence.
Right. So this is the scene where he's getting whipped and everybody's watching sort of in horror. And this young man, you can see how upset he is by the fact that he's getting whipped for showing disobedience to him. And what happens is he comes down to the bottom of the ship that night and he sees all of the young men, all of the lower rungs just staring at him, clear animosity because they don't.
But they salute.
They do, yeah.
Which is important. Even the guy who just got whipped, he salutes. He stands up and salutes. So he's back.
It's sort of a mocking way, right? So everybody's overly saluting so that they're not punished because of what just happened to the other guy on the ship, even though none of them respect them and he knows, or none of them respect him and he knows that. And it's tearing at him. So then he runs back to the quarter where all the other officers are, and begins to cry about the whole thing. And then he has a panic attack. He says that he's sick, but the doctor said there's nothing physically wrong with him. And so here we see again more of the legends of the Jonah being laid forth and equating that with Midshipman Hallam. He can't sleep. And so he comes back to the top deck that night. We see the young officer next to him, and he tells him, "You've always been nice to me.
Yeah.
Thank you." And tells him bye. The young boy doesn't know what the heck he's getting ready to do, and he grabs a cannonball, and then he just jumps off the side of the ship.
Yeah, he Virginia Woolfs himself here. He puts on those little concrete shoes. This is a great scene.
Yeah, so now the eulogy, and everybody's on the top deck. Obviously, an officer has died. And when he's handed the Bible, I don't know if I can stop it. I don't think I can. It shows Jonah. So clearly this guy right here, his right-hand man, wanted him to read about Jonah because all the men on board believe in this superstition that the doctor thinks is ridiculous. But Aubrey says, basically, superstition is real, and we have to make sure that it doesn't run wild. Yeah. So he doesn't want to read the story of Jonah. Instead, he closes the Bible and gives his own sort of eulogy, inspiring the men to become the best men that they can. And then right after that, the rains come. And then they're celebrating. They have drinking water, all that stuff. And then one of the young boys comes and tells the doctor that an albatross, a bird's flying around the boat, that he needs to come up and see him. And of course, this guy takes a gun out and tries to shoot the bird, really for no reason, just to do it, probably just for fun.
He's the Marine. He's the Marine on ship. He hadn't been getting any action. So of course he takes out his gun and he's trying to spill some first blood here, and then ends up this is how men are fallible. They've just been forgiven for what they did, and then they're going to screw up again and almost ruin the whole mission and kill this guy. So.
And he's going to turn. I'm not going to be able to stop it, but he's going to turn to his right here to try to shoot the bird, and shoots the doctor right in the stomach.
Yeah.
And so here they see that the wound is very significant. Aubrey realizes the state of his friend, and he's telling him that the bullet's in there along with a piece of fabric, and it's going to fester if they don't get it out. So he tells him, okay, well, then get it out. And then he starts getting nervous because he's like, well, I'm going to have to read the doctor's books.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, we'll go read them. Let's get going. And really, he is way too timid and does not want to take on this responsibility of trying to pull this bullet and fabric out of the doctor's stomach. Right. And he comes up with the excuse, well, I might be able to do it, but on the ship, everything's moving. I don't know if I can. And Aubrey's like, just get it done. But as days go by, he's sitting there reading a book, trying to figure out what to do in the anatomy of the human body. And the doctor's becoming worse and worse. He's starting to go pale. Looks like he's getting ready to die. And this is when Aubrey makes the decision that they're going to sail back to the Galapagos Islands so that they can get this bullet out of the doctor. And so this scene, he kind of wakes up and he realizes that they're on land. And he says, "Oh, Captain, you didn't need to do this just for me." And I forget the comment, the quip that comes back.
Yeah.
Essentially, I didn't do this for you. We just needed a break.
Right.
Obviously, he's doing it for him. And so here, the guy that's been reading the books, he's still too timid to pull this thing out of his stomach, even though now
Yeah.
they're on land and it's not moving. And so the doctor's just like, okay, I'm going to do it. So tells this guy, hold up a mirror, give me a scalpel. I'm getting ready to cut open my own stomach and we're going to pull this thing out. And he asks Aubrey if he will stay because Aubrey just planned on leaving. And he's like, are you too squeamish to watch this? And he's like, well, I've seen a lot of wounds in my day, and asked him to stay to be there with him. So eventually he's successful and he pulls the bullet and the fabric out of his own stomach.
Yeah.
And then gets it all sewn back up. And so he's laying in the tent for multiple days. It doesn't really say how long they've been there, but he eventually goes out and talks to Aubrey and he tells him that they're going to stay for another week, which he's really excited about because that means that he might be able to explore some of the island. Although I'd imagine his stomach would be pretty damn sore. I don't know, I can't, that takes some real cojones to be able to perform surgery on yourself. And then within just a few days, you're going to walk miles across the island,
Right.
according to the movie. It might be a little bit far-fetched, but anyways, that's what it depicts. So here, the young man with the left hand is coming back, and you can kind of see that the drawings aren't fantastic, but he's learning how to write and draw left-handed and do exactly what the doctor does. And when he looks at new species and tries to document them.
Yeah.
Eventually they go on a walk and they're exploring the whole island, and he's getting all this stuff that he hadn't seen before, putting all these different creatures in these wooden boxes, these cages. And eventually he sees this flightless bird right here that he's been waiting for. This has been the doctor's ultimate goal. And then when he gets up there, the bird leaves. He can't find it. But what he does is he sees over in the opposing bay, the Acheron sitting there.
It is crazy the kind of transition from looking at the beetle, like the small ship, which in the distance, is the same size as this gigantic, is a small beetle, and then this gigantic ship in the distance. And then how they use that later on, it flips so they become the beetle themselves, in disguise, or the stick bug or whatever. Just use the things that God has given them through nature to disguise themselves as the whaling fleet or whatever when they capture the French vessel. But it's also the realization here where he is, he was brought down real low by injury and close to death, and then he's brought back to the shore, and now he's brought up high. He's raised again. He's up on this promontory looking down, and he sees this ship, and he also has this sense of duty, and then gets carried across. And it, like you were just mentioning, his bravery and how hard this guy actually is. He looks so soft. He looks like this frilly dandy wig guy running through the mountains or whatever, but he actually is a tough SOB. So.
Right. You'd have to perform surgery on yourself like that.
Yeah,
but
it's crazy. It reminds me of that scene in, there's a movie called Ronin that I covered with Robert De Niro where he does the same thing. Often in movies, self-surgery is a sign of this guy, the character being extremely hard.
So after the doctor sees the ship, he immediately yells to these guys to stop moving towards the coast and fear that the French are going to see them, and then realize, well, we're on an uninhabited island. Why are there people running around? Must be another ship around.
Yeah.
So he tells them to, come back, hide behind the mountainside, tells them what's going on and that they got to get back to the HMS Surprise as fast as they can. But he's unable to, he's unable to walk with all the luggage. And so we have this little boy essentially with one arm, and then this big brute of a man who's probably not that intelligent, having to carry all of this stuff because the doctor can just have his walking stick and like his little bag. And he tells them that we got to go now. It's getting ready to be dark. Who knows, what's getting ready to happen. So just drop all the animals, open the cages, and let them go free. And that was, again, that mirror that we mentioned earlier about them being in sense captured animals on the ship. And while they were trying to capture animals, they end up letting them free. They ended up letting them loose while they run back to the ship. He rides on this guy's back so that they can prepare for battle.
It's probably pretty far, but there is kind of a Sphinx riddle thing going on here in terms of the symbolism. Like there's the little boy, and then there's the creepy crawly things, you know, on all fours. There's the little boy, there's the giant man, and then there's the guy who's now been brought to being as an old man with a cane trying to make it across this. And they weren't close to the ship, by the way. They're like on the other side of the island. They have to go pretty. I'm so surprised when I watched
miles.
that.
At one point, again, who knows? But for the movie's purposes, he's like, well, we got to go over to those mountains to see what's over there. And the little boy says, that's like 10 miles.
Yeah.
He's like, well, we better start going. And so we're talking the way the movie portrays it, at least 10, potentially 20 miles away, which again is kind of far fetched. It's good for a Hollywood film, but
yeah,
to do all that in a single day while carrying all that stuff is kind of hard to believe, especially the man that just had a bullet in his stomach.
Yeah, they also, there's like a flip flop here because the little boy is now the older character saying, you know, giving a numerical value for how far they have to walk, while the older guy who's just almost been killed is now like a little child in his whimsy trying to go to the mountains.
Oh, that's a great point, dude. That's a great motif. Because that's exactly what's happening. This is the coming of age for the one-armed boy, where he is sort of stepping into his officer role in a way that he hadn't before. And he's taking care of the doctor. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. So, all right, moving forward. Now, again, he shows them one of the bugs, the stick bug. This is when then Captain Aubrey sees it and he goes, why, you know, you have a twig here. And then they explain, well, look further. And he hands him a microscope. And then he realizes that the thing's living. It's actually an insect. And so now he realizes what the plan is. The plan is to disguise the ship as a whaling vessel, lure the Acheron, where they're going to deliberately sail by it, lure the Acheron towards them. And once it gets close, they're going to fire, just again the way in which Thomas Cochrane took over the Spanish ship. I think that was in 1801. So it's the general premise here is based on a historical reality.
It's also revenge for the whalers who were still on the ship, right? Who had their ship destroyed by the French.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. So they're all preparing. They're all changing their clothes. Nobody's allowed to wear British uniform. They're supposed to look like all kind of dumb whalers. And as the Acheron approaches, they want them to look sort of disheveled, not knowing what to do, so that the French have no idea that this is actually a British war vessel. And so they're all getting loaded. They got all the cannons. The cannonballs ready to go. They know the entire game plan here and what they're expected. This is where Captain Aubrey's telling them about taking off the back wheels of the cannon so that they're pointing up, that do not fire until I tell you to. We're going to get extremely close to this ship. And puts the other officer here. He's in charge of all the cannon fire. Which will then, once they jump board, the younger boy will be in charge of the second wave of cannon fire, where he kind of fulfills again that role. So they're waiting for the ship to get close. They have smoke saying, you know, that they're not a war vessel. They surrender. And it's getting closer and closer. Everybody knows what they're getting ready to do. He gives us sort of another inspirational speech for the men, telling them that this is England. Again, the ship is England, no matter where they're at in the world. And this is where he says, we're on the far side of the world.
That's right.
But this is still England.
It's a great speech, dude. It's really great. I mean, and it's great, not just because of the words he says, but because of how captivated his audience is. You know, we're captivated looking at it, but the guys on the ship, look at this kid looking at him. You know, they mean to do some business here. Also, Caravaggio makes a great point. This is a Trojan seahorse. You know, it really is. This is really an Odyssean style of attack here.
Yep. Great point.
Yeah.
So, and this is, again, the culmination is this final battle. Look at all these young faces, right? And they're staying in the lower deck waiting for when the cannon fire begins. And he's telling them when they're going to do it. So everybody knows the plan. Everybody's ready to go. And then eventually the French ship gets closer and closer. And at first it shoots a cannon right over the top of the deck of their ship. And they repainted it. So again, it looks like a whaling vessel. It doesn't look like the HMS Surprise. And again, I something I was going to mention. If you guys, I can't probably stop it, but on the back of the ship, it was renamed the Siren, and obviously the myth of the siren, or this,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's how they pronounce the siren. Remember, this is a
Mm-hmm.
Greek mythology of these sort of mermaid like figures, these beautiful women who would sing these wonderful songs to lure the enemy in, men, sailors, and then they would drown them, take them to the bottom of the ocean, take all their material goods, this type of thing. And so it's, again, we see that Greek symbolism here, because that's, siren is how they rename the ship pretending to be a whale vessel, luring the enemy in.
They should have known. They should have known when they saw that.
Yeah.
They were thrown off by the archaic spelling, I guess. Yeah.
And so now they get close enough, cannons are fired. This is just like Thomas Cochrane. This is about the distance with the Spanish ship that actually happened. And so they're just leveling the broadside of the French vessel here. And eventually he says, okay, boys, it's time to board, pull the ship closer. And then they jump over. The French have a surprise for them. They have more men. They're waiting for them to board, to shoot them. Hand-to-hand battle commences, and eventually they're superior. They win. And the young boy right here, the one-armed young boy, is able to lead the officers at the bottom of the ship to shoot the cannons again. And then he jumps to the other side of the ship and is successful.
Yeah.
So we see, again, that full character arc. Here we see Aubrey actually show a little bit of mercy. We see a French soldier here who actually tries to stab him.
Yeah.
And instead of killing him right away, he lets him just kind of scurry away to further underneath
this guy could not look more French, right? I mean, they really went hard with the casting here, and it's true gallantry. I mean, it also mirrors the Battle of Trafalgar, and it's like a Turner painting or something. With there's a lot of the photography in the movie is dark and kind of lamp lit and not naturalistic, but truthful for a historical piece. We really feel like we're in the inside of this thing. The amount of smoke, the sound editing in the movie is so fantastic because you hear the splinters, you hear the cannon shot, erupting through the ship, and it's really explosive. It's so loud there. It's just amazing to consider that what this all means. I mean, you're on two sovereign pieces of territory floating in the middle of the ocean on the other side of the world,
literally on the far side of the world. Yeah.
And yet they, objects attract and they're lined up with each other. They line up side by side, and it's a real gallant battle. Both sides know exactly what could happen, and they do it anyway. There's swords and sabers. There's muskets. There's the guy running around who's got all the muskets on him. He's the quartermaster or whatever, supplying the other guys. The kids are in the battle. The old men are involved. And what's great about the movie is that the heroes don't all survive like in some sort of big Hollywood movie like we would normally think. A lot of the people that we've come to expect in the movie and love, it shows really it's providential. It shows that in the midst of battles, some people will go and some people will stay. We do get Jack Aubrey at the end because he's the hero, but the rest, and then we get the sort of subterfuge by the French captain, which mirrors what Aubrey did. But we just, when I'm watching it, I hope that the boy survives. If I'm watching it in real time, I just want him to survive. But the rest of them, it's just all sort of up in the air.
Right. And I think what makes the boy even more endearing is his positive attitude towards life, towards the mission, even after losing his arm. Yeah. It's like he's so young that he can't help to continue to be optimistic.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things from what I was reading about the production of the film, many of these battle scenes took place using like historic replica ships in a bay in Mexico.
Yeah, that's cool.
So therefore, the movie, that's why it didn't make so much money, because it cost like $150 million to make the film. And I think it grossed a little over 200 million or something. And that's why, to the people who produced it and financed it, they didn't think of it as a success. But as an art piece, I think it was incredibly successful. And that's why this movie is still so popular, as we mentioned, among millennials in regards to streaming demographics and statistics, that this is still a heavily streamed movie. And they found there's particularly millennials and Gen Z boys that watch it.
It's also in contrast to the movie that won Best Picture that dominated over this movie that year, Return of the King. And I like Return of the King as much as anybody, the Lord of the Rings movie, and people are, fanatical about the movie. But in contrast, it shows you the difference between where Hollywood was going with CGI and where this movie is going on location with set pieces and real actual analog gear.
Right.
They have ships built. You can hear the noises, you can see the people, and they're on the ships. And instead of having a kind of weird Deus Ex Machina like it does in Lord of the Rings, and I understand what happens in Return of the King, and I know why it happens, but that movie relates more to like Pirates of the Caribbean, which is like a fantastical movie where the dead come back alive and we have ghosts. Than this movie where we have people fighting and it's not even historic. I mean, it's historical fiction,
right?
But the movie's set in like 1805. It would have been much later. The books are set around 1812. And
right.
And so, but we get the truth of something that is very human in the midst of these metaphysical ideals of virtue and goodness. And again, Lord of the Rings does that in its own way. But this one is completely different. I think a lot stronger than that movie.
Yeah, well, I think that's why it's a timeless piece. Even though it's historical fiction, but because they used all that analog, it's not like the technology of the latest movie techniques or, this is now an outdated film or something,
Yeah.
No, whether it be in 2003 or in 2030, it's the same film, and it still is so realistic that I think that's why it's such a timeless piece.
Yeah, taking care with craftsmanship and with your gear and with the integrity of the piece that you want to make really, it really pays off with this. It didn't pay off financially at the box office then, but like you said, in a way, it's irrelevant. It pays off for us in terms of what it's trying to achieve.
Piece, yeah. And that's the difference. Again, Hollywood's incentives. Obviously, they need to make money.
Yeah.
But the reason why there hadn't been a sequel is because it didn't make enough money. Yet this movie is timeless. As an art piece, it is great. And they're not interested in making great art. They're interested in making more Avenger films that make more money.
Yeah.
So anyways, this is the captain, right? Or no. He's getting ready to open it. This is the captain, right?
He's behind the veil.
There we go, right here.
Yeah.
So he's getting ready to hand the sword. This is the actual medical doctor who they've dressed up as the French captain, and he's laying wounded.
Yeah. And by the way, can't you tell this guy is the captain? Now that we know it in hindsight, I mean, he's like Jack Aubrey. He's got the same haircut, it's just a different color. He looks like he bears himself like a captain.
Right. No, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. So he hands the captain's sword over to him again as a gesture of respect. And as I mentioned, this is indicative of the scene in which Thomas Cochrane was captured by the French and offered his sword and was rejected by the French because of his admiration for his brilliance. So, anyways, he now believes that the captain is dead. Unfortunately, the young officer who was dedicated and was becoming the man that he wanted to be, he dies. And then we see all the British people being sewn up. And it's kind of a heartfelt scene right here where the one with the one arm wants to sew up his friend who just passed away. And he asks the older man right here, he says, well, let me do that. And of course he only has one left hand. And so he tries to put the thread through, but he can't hold the other side to push it through to actually sew it together. And so he asks, can you help me? And the fact that he, again, silently brings it together, helps him so that he can sew the bag himself with one hand. Kind of a really endearing scene right towards the end of the movie.
This to me, even this guy's face right here is the moment where it's hard not to shed a tear watching this movie, because, movies that are overly emotional, overly sentimental, obviously now we're told how to feel when we watch movies, but this is really something to admire. Just in the depiction of this, you got this young kid who's gone through this rite of passage, who is a man now. He's shed blood in battle, you know, and he's led a battle. And then you get this older guy right here. This guy, I don't know if he says any words in the movie, but this guy is hard, you know. And the two of he's passing on something. He cares for this kid more than we could ever expect in this setting, and it shows what honor it shows me what honor is, what duty is, and how
loyalty. That was the theme that I took for
teamwork.
The movie.
Yeah. I mean, look, man, I know it's, say what you will about sports ball and stuff, you know, just as a metaphor for this, but there is really there are few things for a man or when you're a boy that can match the elation of victory or even teamwork in defeat. You know, giving your all in for a goal and striving and giving everything that you have. You know, and I think that sports is a perfect metaphor for this, and it's something that, I mean, it's a manly pursuit for younger people.
Competition,
and it's supposed to be a stand-in for the competition that we are supposed to expect in the world, and especially in war.
Right.
And when we watch this, it's a heart-rending scene, but you know, these guys are dead, but they are given all honor. They're given dignity. There was a whole thing about how he didn't want to be sewn up. If he died, he didn't want to be sewn up with the needle through his nose, because the body has to be attached to the, you know, you're buried in a part of the sail and you are cast out into the deep, but the oceans will give up their dead, you know, and there's honor and glory in these people dying at the height of giving everything that they had to give for victory, for God, for what they believe in, for their friends, for their people. It's hold fast. He held fast. That's right.
Yep. Great point, Bonsai. Absolutely. Yeah. And for what, if you didn't catch what he's referring to, is the old man that had the plate put in his head he had tattooed on his hand, hold fast.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what he did, is he held fast.
Sick, dude. This movie is, dude, this movie is one for the fellas, man. This one is one for the boys. I mean, if you haven't seen this movie, you have to watch it. It's so rare, and it's invigorating.
Yep. And so here he's saying a few words for the men that died, and then pushing them overboard. And so the young man sees the doctor. The doctor understands what is happening and what's going on. And he hands him the beetle, the Galapagos beetle that he handed him previously, and demonstrated that it's still alive. So even the beetle that he handed him supposedly weeks ago was still alive on the ship. Again, message being that life persists.
That's right.
Even in the face of death.
And he didn't need to talk about what just happened. He doesn't need to share his feelings about it. Instead, he gives him something practical, and he gives him a duty, and he gives him something to do.
Right.
You know, it's just,
and he goes back to work. So the young boy starts going back to documenting some of the species and learning what the doctor's doing.
Look at that dog beside you who wants to watch the movie. Look at that dog. That's a good dog.
Cody's a good boy. I think he's ready for me.
Look at that boy.
He's a good boy. So this is right at the end here. And so now the ship, the British crew is taking over the French Acheron. And this is where he tells the officer that you're basically the new captain of the ship. Congratulations. Yeah. Here's your official orders. That's what he's holding in his hand as the new captain of the British ship, the Acheron, and congratulates him. And then a really good part right here is when he's telling him about the doctor being dead, and he says, or the captain being dead, and that only the doctor lived. And he tells him, well, the doctor died months ago. And that's when they realize that was the captain. And so he tells the crew to follow the Acheron, and they're going to follow it to Valparaiso, where the ship was, his orders were told to take the ship.
Yeah.
So, and that's how the movie ends, is that he tells him, follow the Acheron, and then they get to playing music again. And the movie ends here. If they pull out, you can see, there we go. That's the scene I wanted, where they make a U-turn And the HMS Surprise is now following the Acheron over here, which they now know that the French captain is alive and he's on board. And that's the end of the film.
Glorious, dude. And everybody's back to work. Everybody's climbing the sails and swabbing the deck and back to work. And then we get a pull away God's eye view of the horizon. And that's fantastic. What a great movie. What a great film.
Absolutely. Again, major thank you to our anonymous sponsor for today's stream. Thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate. I've outed his gender, our anonymous donor. Based on comments in the chat, everybody knew that it's a man.
Had to be for this movie. Anyway.
This one's for the boys, as you said. This is a movie for the fellas, for the boys.
This is the ultimate dudes rock movie for sure.
And I gave it two thumbs up. I highly recommend anybody watching it. It's a classic film. It's something that you can watch over and over again, and it still has an impact.
I give it 8 knuckles. Hold fast.
That's great. So that's going to conclude. We have a couple super chats, and then whatever you got, BLA, if you want to address that. We had we had $20 come in from Pim Orsos. Goes, do you think that Russell Crowe was the end of Meg Ryan's Hollywood career? That's a question for you. What are your thoughts?
Proof of life. No, I think that Meg Ryan or her handlers were that was the end of her career, which is a shame because I watched her in a film the other day. I can't remember what it was, but I watched her in something the other day from before all that happened, and she was so great. You know, she was fantastic. Who knows what happened with that? But Russell Crowe, you know, you speak to one thing here, which is that I hope there's not a sequel or a prequel for this film unless one reason they can't do it is because Russell Crowe embodies this character so much.
Well, you know, he's been vocal. Any criticism, and that's what I was just reading about before the movie or before the stream in regards to the movie. And the article that I read highlighted that Russell Crowe has defended this movie multiple times on Twitter when people have attacked it for maybe not having women, diverse cast, or didn't make enough money. And he really wants to make another film of this. And according to what I was reading, it sounded like he was promised that they were going to. It sounded like that was the whole intention. And when he accepted the original film, the expectation was they were going to make a sequel, if not more. It was going to be a film series.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, you know, he's his own worst enemy in this because he's so good in the movie. You couldn't make it without him, and he's too old for it now. You can't have him in the role. You know, I was just talking to somebody on a stream about modern actors, and although I like many of the actors that are out now, there's a definite absence of people that embody this, even the physiognomy that he has in the movie. I mean, it's just not there. So possibly it could work. You never know, but he's just
based on a statement he made in 2021. They were going to make a prequel to it, which again, that's hard to imagine since he's so much older, how they do a prequel. I could see a sequel of say 15, 20 years has gone by.
Yeah.
And this is now, you know, but I haven't read the book. So if it's couched in a very short timeline, that'd be hard to do.
It's just hard to imagine another actor in this role or the movie having the integrity that it did, you know, without the outside interests infecting the rest of the movie. The worst possible outcome would be that they make a series about it. Yeah. Because then we have all room for exposition about, you know, the feelings of the various characters. But just looking at them and looking at the people that they cast in this movie, it's just, there are actors out there, obviously, that are like this, but it's really the problem in terms of the creativity of how they want to portray it. So it's a totally different time now for having a movie like this. And that's one of the reasons why this movie is so good and will continue to be good, because it represents not only the time in which it takes place, but it's a time in which movies were still like this.
Right. Yeah. So I really wish they made the sequel. I think it was 2005 was the plan for the second installment, and they never did it, but that would have been phenomenal. Yeah. So thank you so much, Pim, for the generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. Along with Orthodox Christian Bale threw in $5 earlier. And just a reminder, he said, be a master and a commander, not a masturbator and a coomer.
That's right.
Thank you for that. And then you had a super chat over on your channel by Circle G, throws in.
That's right.
Says, I would be interested in a sequel about the careers of Lieutenant Tom Pullings and Midshipman
Blakeney.
Blakeney as much as Captain Aubrey, it would have to be the same actors, though, at the point that you just made.
Yeah. I think the problem, that's a good point. And thank you, Circle G, for that $10. And also shouts out to Jason, who dropped $8 there on PayPal.
Nice.
Appreciate you guys for the support. I think that the problem is, one of the things is that with Hollywood is that when we get something that is so good, we want more of it. But the best thing to do in instances like this is to leave it how it is, in my opinion, is to leave it how it is, because number one, it's based on books, but it's an original piece. And there are so many sequels and prequels that we get. We need to continue. If somebody should write a new book with new characters, they go through an archetypal kind of hero's journey here. So there are plenty of other movies that deal with the same sort of themes. It's just set in a different time period or what have you. A great example, another nautical movie would be White Squall. I covered that in a Ridley Scott film analysis. It's set in the 20th century. It's Jeff Bridges, and it's a bunch of boys in a semester at sea going through a sea journey, and it is about what makes you a man and the struggles that you go through. And it's it's an original story. It's based on historical record also, but something else that is
shout out to Jason
original.
Yeah, he says, can we all from now on refer to BLA COTEL collaborations as the HMS Shagwell? Shout out to Jason. God bless you, brother, and the family. Hope you guys are well. That's hilarious. But I totally agree. And you said, was it Jason or somebody that dropped you $8? Did they leave a comment?
No comment there. That was just Jason dropping his support because he's a big supporter. Well, appreciate you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason and Circle G, for support. Again, guys, BLA's link, I imagine everybody who watches these already follows you and me. So, but if you don't follow BLA, he's added in the video description. You click that, go to his channel, and his link is also in the video description. So I think that's going to do it. We're just shy of 3 hours. Guys, smash that like. Major thank you to Pim and Orthodox Christian Bale. Appreciate that support on my end, guys. Let me just double check, make sure nobody sent anything in before we hop off. And no, that looks like that's it. So BLA, any final words?
Yes, thank you so much for having me again. As you guys go back into the archives and look at the 20 plus movies that we've analyzed and reviewed here. We've done a bunch of stuff. There is a Gladiator sequel coming out with Ridley Scott. I don't have high hopes for it. I just did Napoleon. That was one of his more recent films, which I did not have, which ties in.
I didn't hear many good reviews of that film. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. And if you're looking for more movies that are like this, I would recommend U-571 with Matthew McConaughey. Fantastic submarine movie, World War II, or The Hunt for Red October. I like
Hunt
movies
for Red
that are based
October
on
is a classic.
Submarines. I mean, Hunt for Red October is so fantastic. Another great example of strong male leadership. And so hopefully we'll have more movies like this in the future. You guys, I'll be doing a stream coming up this week. I'll be doing, again, an analysis of Cujo, The Ghost in the Darkness, and The Gray, the movie with Liam Neeson. Also, The Trial, Franz Kafka, Cosmopolis by Don DeLeo. And I'll probably be on the members. I'll probably be talking about the J.D. Vance book, which I tore through last night, if anybody's interested in that. And also Lawrence of Arabia coming up as well.
And I'll be back Thursday evening, and we will be doing an overview of Orthodox saints in the British Isles. We got some really fascinating saints that I'm sure many of you guys have not heard of. So if you have British heritage, as I do, I think it's really good if you're an Orthodox Christian to see that we actually have so many saints from that area before the Great Schism, and they have very interesting stories in life. So I'll be sharing that Thursday night. So I will see you guys then, and potentially we'll do a 30K celebration stream Friday night. I got to come up with what we're going to do for the content, but if you guys have ideas, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know what you suggest.
Nice.
So, all right, guys, I will see you all Thursday night. Thank you again, BLA. God bless you, brother, and God bless everybody out there. Wish you guys nothing but the best, as well as your families. So, as always, until next time, God bless.
Peace.